breathtaking scenery, endangered animals and plants found nowhere else. This is South African national parks. With 20 national parks in 7 of the 9 provinces under SANParks custodianship, we have something for everyone. SANParks is the largest conservation entity in Southern Africa and is responsible for close to 70% of South Africa's protected areas, which includes over 4 million hectares of land and sea. World-class scientists apply state-of-the-art conservation techniques to protect the biodiversity in our parks. The operations of SANParks are founded on 3 core pillars, which are conservation, responsible tourism, and socio-economic transformation. Through protecting the environment and providing tourism opportunities, SANParks ensures that the people of South Africa and the world benefit from and connect with our national assets. The parks offer an impressive array of accommodation, including camping, secluded hideaways, chalets, and high-end lodges. The activities in our parks are exciting and exhilarating for any traveler, young and old alike. The sustainable and responsible tourism practices that we implement in our parks are of the highest quality, and the income generated through tourism funds supports our core mandate of conserving biodiversity and cultural heritage. SANParks inspires and connects society to nature. Visit sanparks.org to learn more about our world.
Hello, good afternoon, Sanbonani, wherever you are in the country. My name is Kaya Sitole, and some of you may have seen my ugly face on TV saying something controversial. I'd like you to please forgive me for whatever it is that I've said to offend you before. The very first thing that I need to highlight to you is that, as you saw in that video, it mentioned that SANParks is available in 7 of the 9 provinces. And interestingly, one of the provinces where it doesn't have a presence is KZN. And it was only on that basis that they then said, I need to come and participate in this event because I'm from KZN. So I'm the missing park that doesn't exist on the SANParks model. So therefore, thank you for incorporating us as the province of KwaZulu-Natal in today's program. Of course, this is the first time we're engaging like this in many, many years, and it's good to see human beings. This is probably the largest number of people that I've been in a room with in a few days, well, except for the other time we were stuck at the airport with a whole lot of other strangers, but they were all wearing masks. And the important thing here is that I can finally see faces. And obviously, the one problem with being able to see people's faces is that suddenly you have to remember that I might have said something that offended you. And again, I apologize for that. But thank you very much for coming through to this particular event. This is, of course, the 2022 version of the SANParks Tourism Investment Summit. The last time we had this was 2017. The world looked very different. And I suppose the one thing that explains in greatest detail how different the world looked is the fact that I was about 8 kilometers lighter than I am today. And I looked much younger. So that's how different the world was. But of course, we now know that since then, a lot of things have happened, a lot of changes, and in particular, the tourism sector has been acutely affected. Now, of course, when we talk about the tourism sector and we talk about, that sector in particular, it is probably one of the most interesting ones because of its intersectionalities. So when we talk about these intersectionalities, there's always the question of what happens when a person decides to come and actually visit South Africa. How many other sectors are immediately activated? So if you're talking about the employment sector, suddenly we see that that particular tourist is able to sustain a particular job. And some of you may be interested to learn that actually, out of all the jobs that we have in South Africa, 1 out of every 22 jobs is actually sustained by the tourism industry. So it's a very critical sector. But quite interestingly, there's always the question of why do people come to South Africa in the first place? And that is, of course, where you then find the role of the Department of Forestry and Fisheries and the Environment, because guess what? the one thing that distinguishes South Africa compared to many other destinations are the remarkable natural resources that we have, and that is precisely one of the key reasons that tourists keep saying that I want to come to South Africa, I want to see these particular natural beauty items that only South Africa can present. So this one particular department is the one that probably should be able to say to all the other departments, do you guys know how important we are to you? Because if we didn't have all of these resources, would people come and visit the country? And if people didn't come and visit the country, would you be able to report on the employment numbers that you report on? So it's a remarkably important part of our ecosystem. There's also, of course, the reality that since the 16th of March 2020, 745 days ago, we've then seen the very, very, very reality of how fragile our own systems may be, how fragile our own economy might be, because if you remember the 16th of March, there was a family meeting. Usually family meetings are a good thing, but from that moment onwards, we learned that family meetings can be a bad thing. Because there was the one family meeting that said to you, stay at home, stay indoors. And for young people like me who are used to going out and hang out with other people, that was a problem. But you can imagine how big a problem it was for people whose livelihoods depend on the ability of everybody else to do something, to go out there and engage. And that's, of course, the hospitality industry, that's the tourism industry, and that is the aviation industry in particular. So over the past 745 days, they've been living through the most difficult times that you can imagine. We now know that things are getting better. We're still trying to manage the pandemic, but things are getting better. And of course, the fact that I can be here today, that I can stand up not wearing a mask because I'm fully vaccinated, that's one of the things that we see are getting better. We obviously hope that things will get much better as time goes on. But the reality is that we're going to have to live with this new reality. We're going to have to live through the pandemic. We're going to have to conquer it by confronting it face on. And that is where the question of what were we doing before 2020 has to come back. And guess what? Before 2020 happened, there were a lot of avenues, there were a lot of partnerships that were being activated, particularly in the tourism sector, particularly in the environment sector, to then say, if South Africa is going to capitalize on the resources that it has, if South Africa is going to capitalize on its unique capabilities, we need to get partnerships together. So at the end of the day, at the end of this Tourism Investment Summit, that is the one question that should linger at the back of your mind. What are these new partnerships that we're activating? What are these new opportunities that we're putting together in order to enable this very critical aspect of our economy to actually assist all of us do much better, to help us all build back better? That is the essence of what we're trying to get through today. And of course, we now know that we live in a virtual environment. So many years ago, the first thing that I was expected to do was to tell people that if you step out and then you turn right, that's where you find the restrooms. Well, these days, the protocol that I have to tell you is how to actually tweet about this event, because the virtual world says that the only way people know that something happened is either if it's on Instagram or if it's on Twitter. In other words, if it's not there, did it really happen? That's very, very debatable. Today's hashtags is Invest Tourism. That's the first hashtag. The other one is Invest SANParks. Invest Tourism, Invest SANParks. Please use those two hashtags to tell everybody that we are here, we are engaging, we are talking, we are planning ahead as the country of South Africa. Of course, for some of you that are in the media fraternity, if you'd like to do follow-up conversations based on what we debate today, you are able to actually firstly log on to SANParks.org. That's where you're going to get the link that takes you directly into this event. When you get onto that website, there's a lady wearing a mask. Now, the problem is that she's quite catchy. She's very beautiful. So when you log on to SANParks.org, you see her face, and you may miss that right next to her neck, there's a link that says Connect. So look around her neck, you're going to see that there's a link that says connect, and that's how you're actually going to connect onto the virtual version of this particular event. I don't know why they decided to do it that way, because I did get distracted when I logged on, but please stay focused, log on to that link that says connect to this particular summit. Of course, we've got a stellar lineup of speakers that are going to be talking us through some of the key observations, some of the key talking points, and some of the key ways going forward. We are expecting to be joined shortly by the Minister of Forestry and Fisheries, Mrs. Barbara Creasy. She's actually on her way here from another event, so when she gets here, you'll obviously be able to hear from her. But of course, we also have representation from the SANParks board. Ms. Pam Yako will be on stage shortly to talk us through some of the key expectations from today. And quite importantly, as I told you, those of you that are joining us virtually, there are human beings in this room. I wish I had a selfie that could go around and show you that there are indeed human beings in this room. So they have joined us here, various stakeholders, leaders of business that have an acute interest in the sustainability and the viability of the sector. But of course, very importantly, it is you, as the citizens of South Africa, who of course have to be part of this conversation, because whatever we deliberate on in here is going to have an impact on what happens out there in the world of employment, in the world of tourism, and in the economy at large. So we'll definitely like to get your insights and hear your voices. Later on, we'll have a Q&A, and in that Q&A, we obviously want to hear your views. We don't want to just limit the conversations to the people that are here. So that is the essence of what we've got lined up for you today. Now, of course, it wouldn't be a complete event without us hearing the different voices of the people who have to wake up every single day and actually deliberate on how to keep the sector viable. So we're going to start off with a particular panel discussion that is going to focus on that. It will be led by Leanne Manas. But before then, to obviously welcome us all formally, in spite of everything that I've said, I still have to actually enable you to be welcomed by the people that are actually making this happen for us. I'd like to invite onto the stage the chairperson of the SANParks board, Ms. Pam Yako.
Vaccinated?
Yes, very much.
Okay. And you want me on the stage? Yeah. Let's see. This afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. As introduced, my name is Pam Yako, and my job is just to welcome everyone. I'm not a speaker, so I'm not going to speak. And just to say, on behalf of SANParks, the whole family, the board, the management, and of course, our colleagues in the tourism industry, would like to welcome you to this event. So Kaya was talking about the fact that you had not been what did he say? Together with people. So in the last, whatever many days, he said, over 700 days, I've kind of been on sleepers and techies. So I had to practice this morning just to show up in shoes. And I had a chat to Lindy sitting there earlier on, and we said, good thing, I mean, we didn't go too high. And we decided to have something thick here, so just for balance and just for control. But we're happy to clean up nicely and just show up. So SANParks, as you know, this is our second tourism investment conference. And we've got participants in the room, and we've got hopefully more participants online. So my job is to welcome all of you, at the same time welcome the people online. And why is this important to us? I think as broadly as the tourism industry, I think this is the role that SANParks plays as one of the key or premier conservation agency, if not on the continent, actually. We play in terms of providing the product and ensuring that not just offering a tourism product, but we do it in a way that is in line with conservation principles and practices. It's what keeps us in business. And of course, as some of you might or might not know, that I think since about the early 2000s, the government said we need to find a way of diversifying our income. And start looking at growing the tourism portfolio as a way to fund conservation. So as part of that, then the commercialization strategy was developed, and I think the CEO will speak to that. So I'm not going to I need to welcome and not deal with the speeches. that both the minister and the acting CE will speak about. But I can't just say Molweni and walk away, you know. So tourism is key to our business. It constitutes about 80% of our revenue, and so it's not just because the tourism industry pays our bills, but we do this because it is core to our business, and we think that we are a key player as SANParks, not just in looking after the biodiversity and conservation, but also being hospitable as the rest of you are in the role that you play in the industry. So this event is important to us in terms of opening up our parks and ensuring that we bring investors across the spectrum. And it's about diversification of the product and the offering. It's about making the tourist experience, improving on that experience for whoever comes to our parks. But it's also about serving South Africa Inc., which oftentimes when we talk about tourism, we forget that there is domestic tourism is equally important, and that actually what we do it on behalf of South Africans. So we've been given a responsibility to look after South Africa's natural and cultural heritage so that generations to come can also find that they can still find our species when they go into the park. So when we talk about a lion, that actually a lion still exists. And also in terms of our flora, that people can still find that. So that's our job. And tourism enables us to do that. But we also want to say, as part of this summit or conference, is that to get that to happen, we can't do it alone. We need partners, and that's where everyone else comes into the picture. So it's you're all welcome, and hopefully as we proceed during the day, we will get to at least speak to one another, to those people that are here, and we get to hear what your expectations are of SANParks, but most importantly, get to see you and your families and your friends visiting our parks, not just but stay there for a couple of days. But welcome to this summit, and all of the best, and over to you, Kaya.
Thank you very much there from Hemyako, from the SANParks board. And of course, I think one of the great benefits of having been able to work remotely over the past 2 years is that we've been able to run a lot of these events wearing the type of things that would have horrified all of you if you had seen me wearing them today. I've been able to do a lot of TV interviews wearing the type of things that actually were not designed for TV interviews, which is a very important thing. And quite ironically, there is perhaps a group of individuals that throughout the past 745 days have been actively denied the right to be able to dress as they see fit in order to be able to be on TV, because whenever we wake up and we see Leanne Manas on TV, there's an expectation that she has to dress a bit more properly than Kaya does dress. Even if I'm talking to her, I can get away with things that she can't get away with. So of course, she is our facilitator for the panel discussion that we're going to have now, and that's Leanne Manas from AM Live. And of course, after this panel discussion, we're still going to be hearing from the minister. We're also quite more interestingly going to be hearing from a conversation around this interesting question of public-private partnerships, that's the one part, and the question of public procurement. A lot of you will be aware that the issues of public procurement found their way to Braamfontein, not in a good way, because when things get into the Constitutional Court, it means that there hasn't been a meeting of the minds, and of course that's something that we should always strive for, and in that particular case we didn't get them, and would like to hear about what the implications of that are, particularly for the tourism sector, particularly for the ongoing issues around public procurement. That's a conversation that we're going to have later on. But right now, it is quite important for us to ask the question, the future of tourism, what does it look like? The future of tourism in South Africa, what does it look like? And I think Pam alluded to the fact that actually some people may forget that even we as citizens are tourists in one way or another, because if you decide to go and visit KZN, which all of you must do, never mind all those other provinces, KZN is where you must go and visit us there. We've got the best beaches in the country. We actually have them, when you drive through the Midlands, I feel jealous for all of you who haven't been to KZN in recent times. So I'm just saying, I'm not promoting KZN, I'm just telling you my reality, that KZN is the one province that when I visit, I enjoy. But of course, when you look at the tourism numbers, it's actually quite interesting that up to 75% of the tourists that come into South Africa, well, at least until 2020 happened, were actually coming from the SADC region. And that is a very important number because for a lot of people, they seem to have the view that you only become a tourist if your flight took 10 or 11 hours to get here. That is clearly not the case. So South Africa has to leverage its proximity to these other countries that form the SADC region and enable that ability of tourists to come in here and to spend their rands here because we need their rands and we need to be able to make this system as conducive as possible. In order to get the system to be as conducive, we definitely need to have partnerships. So, the question of tourism, what does its future look like, is something that my esteemed panelists are about to deliberate on. And of course, Leanne Manas is going to be taking us through that particular conversation. And it is one that I'm specifically looking forward to because I think the insights that you're going to get from these particular panelists are quite diverse and quite important. And they've been at the coalface of the bloodbath that we've seen over the past 2 years. And the fact that they're still standing means that they believe that there is a future. Are they correct? We're about to find out. Leanne?
I'm carrying so much. My mic's falling off, I'm carrying so much. This is the joy of being a woman. We can do so much and you don't even know we're doing it until we get tangled and then we untangle ourselves and we're ready for action. Ladies and gentlemen, what a joy. I can't tell you what this means to me to A, be here, B, be standing in front of a crowd, and C, having hugged a few people. This is a big deal. It is a big deal. And I think, I honestly do, I took all of it for granted, but I must say that after the few years that we've been through, I don't think I'm going to take these things for granted anymore. I really am not. You know, as much as I don't and began to loathe traveling and running from the airport, not for holiday, but for work, running in and out of the airport, packing a bag, quickly rushing here, rushing there, that suddenly came to a standstill. And I didn't think I'd miss it, but I did. And that, for me, is quite incredible. It's an amazing feeling to have woken up in the Eastern Cape this morning, in East London, caught a plane, got back, and here I am in Johannesburg now. That is normal. That is what we've become accustomed to. This is how the economy ticks. This is how life should be, but it wasn't that way. And the reality is that the tourism industry relies on the fact that you and I travel, that we do what is a passion, that we uncover the pages and the beautiful landscape of every country on this planet. Because at the end of the day, we have one life. I've always said this. We have one life. We have to live it. We have to see. We have to enjoy. And it is not what you take with you when you leave this world. It's the memories that you take with you. And these are experiences that, even though we haven't had the opportunity, well, I speak for myself, to travel internationally, and I'm sure a lot of you have done the same thing. The one thing, and I think Kaya really spoke to that, is that You don't have to travel for 6.5 hours to be a tourist. In fact, there's nothing nicer than being a tourist in your own country. And that is one thing that I have realized. Even though I may not have left the borders of South Africa over this time of COVID, I'll tell you what, I have discovered places in this country. I have felt things in this country. I have seen things in this country that I am absolutely humbled by. And that's the great experience that I think we've learned over these years. However, do all South Africans do this? Do all South Africans know this? Or do they have to save every single penny to travel overseas and pay their currency when they could be here? But these are the kind of things that we're going to talk about as the future of tourism here in South Africa, not only for you and I, but of course for international tourists as well, because there is so much to offer here. This is a land that has everything. As I said to you, I woke up in the Eastern Cape staring at the wild ocean to fly back into Johannesburg, to the hustling, bustling city. Now, I mean, this is an incredible experience. 1 hour, 10 minutes, and you can do it. So we have a lot to offer. How do we tap into it? And how do we increase what we as a tourism industry offer to the GDP in South Africa? And perhaps this is that golden opportunity that we need to capitalize on right now. Thank you to Kaya for introducing me. My name is Leanne Manus. I'm going to be the facilitator for this panel, where we are going to look at the future of tourism in the country. We've got an esteemed panel that we have got, and I'm going to introduce them to you in a couple of minutes' time. I want you to send questions as well. You're watching at home, in the office, wherever you may be online. We want you to be involved in this, because this is your investment as much as it is our investment. So please send in questions, and I'll certainly be able to put them to our panelists today and hopefully get some answers. You know, the wonderful thing when I think about well, I don't know if it's wonderful. It's a two-way game, because I remember during the lockdown, do you remember seeing the visuals that were coming out of some of the game parks? Animals were coming out that never normally did. Penguins were suddenly walking in streets, and the whole world was looking at this thinking, are you serious? There are penguins walking in the streets. The lions, the elephants, the wildlife that suddenly emerged because it was quiet and no one was there to see the spectacle, and they came out. But I couldn't help but think, as much as they were enjoying it, where were the people? Where were the people to witness this? And not online through a screen, but in the flesh. So it was beautiful to see nature coming alive, but we need to come alive with nature. And that's what we're going to do here today. There is nothing for me more important than SANParks and what they offer to South Africa. I mean, I think I've traveled to every single one of SANParks around the country, and it humbles me every single time. And when I miss or am not here, that is the one thing I crave. And I'm sure everybody feels the same way. It's the first thing people want to do when they land in South Africa is go to a park. So let's talk about the future of this. How do we maintain this level? How do we make it better? That's what we want to do. We need to constantly improve ourselves. So to help me navigate this topic, it gives me great pleasure in introducing my panelists up onto the stage. First up, Mr. Chifiwe Jivengwa. He, of course, is the CEO of the Tourism Business Council of South Africa. Always wonderful engaging with him. So let's give him a round of applause. Thank you, Mr. Jivengwa. Great to see you. Then our next panelist is the very handsome Andile Khumalo. I've said that before. You know why? Because now I'm seeing you without your mask on again. So I'm reminded of how elegant and lovely you look. He, of course, is an entrepreneur, and he is the chairperson of the SANParks Investment Committee of the board. Nice to see you, Andile. Are we social distancing between each other? Whatever you feel comfortable. The next one. This is the hug I was talking about. So here she is, Ms. Lindiwe Sangweni Sido. She, of course, is the Chief Operations Officer of City Lodge Hotels. So lovely to see you, and welcome. Let me move this over. I told you it was all the luggage I was carrying with me. And then our final panelist for today, it gives me great pleasure in welcoming Mr. Aaron Munetsi, who is the CEO of the Airlines Association of Southern Africa. Aaron, thank you. So nice to see you. All right, I told you we don't mess around. We got the best of the best, the creme de la creme. Have a seat over there, if that's okay with you all here.
She mustn't feel lonely.
Come and sit next to us. Come sit between the ladies. I'm going to come and sit here.
Yes.
Okay, I'm also going to join you all. Oh, yeah, move. Let's get together. We all, as Kaya's worried about, we're all vaccinated. I think in fact, I went for my booster over the weekend, and I thought I was going to feel yuck, but I actually didn't. So, double thumbs up. Go get your booster. It's not that bad. Guys, welcome.
Thank you.
Isn't it so nice that we are here and talking about your passions that I'm sure for the last 2 years you've been panicking about and worrying about. Let's start with the airline industry. I mean, actually, no. Let's not even talk about your specific industries. I want to start by getting opening comments from every single one of you, and we take it from there. So, Aaron, talk to me. You sitting right next to me. I can see you. Talk to me about how you've visualized the future of travel and what it's been like for you over this time.
Thank you, Leanne, and thank you, SANParks, for inviting me. I think as the airlines, we take the mantle of being the hardest hit by this pandemic. But the one thing I like to say to people, especially about us as South African airlines, is that we are resilient, we are robust, and we never doubted our capacity to be able to come out of this on the other side, thin, lean, mean, and even better. We understood exactly what we were going through. We've been through quite a number of pandemics. We've been through 911, we've been through Ebola, we've been through all kinds of things, Leanne. But we knew, without a doubt, that no matter what happens, we are going to come out of this lean, mean, and better. And with that in mind, to answer your question, for us, it's not even a question of what next for tourism, for South African tourism. For us, the question is, how are we going to make it better?
Yeah.
Because we believe it's going to be better. Every one of us in this room and everyone who is listening believes that it's going to get better. And we always say a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. We are in the middle of a crisis right now. Let's make this crisis work for us. So there are certain things that we have done as the airline industry. The first thing that we have done is we have recalibrated, we have made sure that we have fixed everything that needed to be fixed in terms of, number one, our operational capability. We are ready. We were so ready that the moment we were given the opportunity to be able to take our aeroplanes into the skies, Leanne, we did not doubt. We were up there and we were doing it.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing we did. The second thing we did was also to make sure that we continuously engage with our stakeholders. And this is where SANParks comes in, because the stakeholders involve SANParks in the environment that they provide, the facilities that they provide, the ambience that they provide through the ministry that is responsible. So our stakeholders are everybody, anybody and everybody. Like Kaya said earlier on, actually the statistics worldwide say 1 in every 10 jobs is tourism related.
Yeah.
And those jobs cannot be, generated if there's no travel. And Leanne, the question, in fact, the correction that I want to make is, according to the United Nations World Tourism Organization, a tourist is a person who spends 1 day or more away from home. Whether you travel by road, by air, by sea, as long as you spend a day away from home. So if you are from Johannesburg and you're in Tshwane, you spend a day away from home, you're a tourist. I can see the gentleman laughing more.
Behave. Behave.
The third thing, to answer your question, Leanne, we are confident that by having forums like this, having this kind of a summit, we are going to unearth the opportunities that have always been there. These opportunities have always been there. They were just waiting to be unearthed. And we are going to say it does not necessarily have to be aeroplanes alone. Aeroplanes play a big role. But can you imagine, right now as we speak, South African domestic travel is leading not only in the SADC region, but across the entire African continent, and we are up there with the top 5 domestic markets in the world in terms of revival compared to 2019. So we are not going backwards, we are going forward, and we believe that as long as we continue doing the things that we are doing, South African tourism is going to grow by the day. Thank you.
All right. Aaron, thank you. Amazing. I love hearing you, but I'm stuck on the 1 night away from home, you're a tourist. But that's my mind. It's very naughty. I'd like to welcome in the room, and it's wonderful to have her with us, the Minister. Thank you very, very much, Minister. Forest, Fisheries and Environment has made her way here, so we're grateful to have you. We look forward to hearing from you in a short while. Now, one lady that I must say has been exceptionally vocal this entire lockdown and how difficult it has been for restaurants to cope during this time has been very, very difficult. So I also want to welcome up onto stage on our panel, Wendy Alberts. Wendy, thank you very much. I know you're in the room. There you are, Wendy. So lovely to have you here. Wendy Alberts, of course, from the Restaurant Association. Thank you so much. Please come and have a seat with us here on the panel. I mean, I think it's very difficult to have a conversation without talking to the future of this industry and how, of course, it has been damaged through this time too, but the growth and looking forward. So, Wendy, wonderful to have you. Thanks very, very much for being with us. All right, let's continue to hear the views of panelists now. So we heard the opening remarks from Aaron in terms of the airline industry. So, I mean, City Lodge hotels, one of the biggest chains. I mean, it's massive all over. Wherever you go, you see one. And that's what's so wonderful about it. So Lindiwe, let's talk to it. And I mean, how hard it's been, and look a little forward for me at the same time.
Yeah, so good afternoon. And thank you, Leanne. And thank you for the big warm hug.
Yeah.
And good afternoon, Minister. It's good to see you. And thank you very much to Chairperson of SANParks and the entire SANParks executive. They have made this happen. You know, I'm a hotelier, so when I walk into a full, busy lobby, I just get goosebumps and I get excited because it means business is back. And so just by SANParks having this investment summit here today is again testament to how important it is for us to start going back to what we used to do. And even though it's a hybrid meeting, it's lovely that, you know, even though they're my competitor, but the hotels are back to being busy. It's been a tough time. But I think it's also lovely now that we can see the horizon and we can see that the light at the end of the tunnel is not the one coming for us, but the one that is going to shine for us. It makes it all the more positive and much more optimistic. So I'm not one to really cry too much on spilt milk and go back to the fear and the unknown that we were all, doesn't matter which industry you were in, but that we were all faced with 2 years ago. Granted, there were some consequences that still sit with us. For example, the massive job losses that resulted as a consequence from the pandemic. My colleagues, I'm sure, like Wendy, will talk about how many of the hospitality businesses, and many others, I'm sure even the SANParks had the question marks of who stays on, who doesn't, salary reductions. And the entire industry, I think, is reported to have lost up to nearly 500,000 jobs. So that gives us, you know, what our job is in terms of getting people re-employed and making sure that we recover what was lost, but also continue building, because even before COVID, we still talked a lot about job creation. So in terms of the future and coming from where we are as the hospitality industry, and I'll also talk from a transformation point of view, because transformation is very close to my heart. I sit on the Tourism Transformation Council of South Africa as the chairperson, and I don't think you can talk about any growth or any way forward without making sure that inclusivity is at the table and that transformation is given its fair share. We noted the importance of the leisure sector. And for many years now, if you've been in the tourism industry, you often marvel at other, you know, destinations like the Australians or the French and some others who long ago recognized the importance of supporting local and supporting domestic travel. And once we were faced with a pandemic that closed our borders off, regionally, internationally, the reality came home that there was no other way that our business could be revived if we didn't have local and domestic travelers doing what they do. And so with that came many things to look at. First of all, there were those who were highly reliant on international travel, and thank goodness it is coming back. I'm not suggesting that we don't need international travel, but what we should be looking at in the future is making sure that we don't take local and domestic travel for granted.
Yeah.
That we continue making it exciting and fun and accessible for our people to travel, for it to be price sensitive in terms of the different varying pockets of people, for it to be accessible in terms of, do you fly, do you go by train, do you drive on good roads, and for that once a family is there, that an entire family can be taken care of in whatever that experience is, whether it's in a park, by the sea, or parents who are working, which is a big thing now, work and leisure, as we call it, a bit of business and a bit of leisure. So I would really want that in our discussions about what the future looks like, how do we make sure that South Africa learns from what we've just experienced about the loss of business from international markets and how important it is to resurrect and to make sure that we keep our local and domestic travel interested. Interestingly enough, in the group that I work for, City Lodge Hotel Group, we never recognized how important until this time that weekend business is. And weekend business has become so much more important. And remember, weekenders come back for business during the week. The other aspect, of course, I talk about inclusivity. I hope that we will reflect on infrastructure. If we want to make sure that our marginalized participants of our country in the rural areas, in the townships, in the dorpies, are included in the way forward in making sure that we have a vibrant and beautiful future in our tourism industry, we need to really, first of all, make sure that the infrastructure in those remote areas is addressed. Sometimes not even so remote. Sometimes it's just pure infrastructure issues that we're talking about in our cities, that our municipalities can take care of. And in these partnerships that we will be exploring, that private-public partnership becomes so much important in how do we make sure that infrastructure, the roads getting into our rural areas, the access that we want travelers to have, be it local or international travelers, is easy, safe, and it can be robust, it can be rustic, but it should be safe and comfortable to get to wherever it is that we need to go. And of course then in that inclusivity, making sure that we make sure that all those SMEs that lost their businesses because of COVID are given access to funding and finance that will address their requirements in, first of all, recovering their businesses, revitalizing their businesses, or even just pivoting and turning their business upside down and doing what works and not necessarily relying on what they used to do. So innovation has to become part of it, but really making sure that there is access to funding by SMEs, because we all know that once SMEs are participating in the economy, we have a vibrant trajectory, and jobs are recreated, and the opportunities of small businesses becoming larger businesses is in place. I could go on, Leanne, but let me pause there. Those are the opening thoughts that
Excellent.
I have.
And some wonderful key issues that you've brought up that we can pick on and take forward. Delia, let me hand it over to you. Give us some opening remarks as well.
You talked about sharing our passions and how we're feeling about 2 years of not seeing each other. So I did 3 things in hard lockdown. 1, I've never worked so hard at home in my life. Suddenly everything's broken. There's a crack there. There's waterproofing issues there. That door doesn't really lock. And I haven't really gotten that out of my system. I find myself still doing it. But the other thing that I did do is travel to the country to places I'd never traveled before. The upside of lockdown was the fact that we were kind of stuck with each other, right? So, and that gave us an opportunity to explore. And I certainly saw for myself how much more South Africa has to give to South Africans long before the tourists that come from outside that we potentially don't take advantage of enough. And I'm not just talking about the mountains, the beaches, and the bush. There's so many experiences in so many parts of the country that I certainly experienced that I'd never done before. And I think that in itself speaks to the opportunity of why we're all here today. The 20 parks that my colleagues at SANParks operate I always say to what does that mean? We've got 1 plus 19, because that Kruger is a whole animal on its own, right? But there's 19 others that, many of us haven't experienced. I'm not sure how many people in the room have been to Addo Elephant Park and experienced what that is all about. But I think, Sis Lindy, we touched on the key issues, and for me, the third thing that I did is my passion. So I was asked by one of the leading financial institutions in South Africa to consult on how they can contribute to SA Inc. And lockdown was interesting because we all got to work on big ideas in the hope that the world will someday come back to normal. And what was very interesting, they hired all sorts of consultants and researchers. And what was very interesting is that at the end of the research, with the brief of please find us what we can do with this much of money to help contribute to SA Inc., one industry came out tops. An industry that if they put in money in, they will get the right returns, and the right returns are money returns, social returns, and socio-economic returns. And there was tourism. Yeah. Many people don't think of tourism as an export product. That's really what it is. We sell stuff, we get paid in dollars and euros. And that in itself starts making you look at tourism differently. Jobs, in terms of the ability to create jobs, and I don't mean only the sophisticated that need necessarily, or rather that has high barriers to entry. The tourism industry, of which we are all in, by the way. We're all in tourism here. If you smile and you walk around, you're in tourism. Because many people go to countries because they say the people are friendly, right?
Yeah.
The ability to create work opportunities from the most sophisticated to the most unskilled. There's no other industry that can do that other than tourism. The ability to create an inclusive economic opportunity for businesses, the biggest guys like the city lodges, to the smallest guys like the lady that sells the craft at your nearest market. There's no other industry that can do that. Most industries, you have to be qualified, you have to come up with this really great product. Think of banking, think of mining. You got to understand what's in the ground, how to dig it out. So tourism, if ever there was an industry, that should be the first agenda item of any government conversation about how to change its economy. I put it to the world that has to be tourism.
Yeah.
It creates jobs, it creates taxes, it has forex income, it creates work opportunities for everyone, especially SMEs. And the last point I would say is the work that we have been involved with at SANParks. So myself and a few colleagues that are in the room, we are an investment committee at SANParks, not of the board, but at the executive, which I actually like. Because very often when we talk about our state-owned entities and the ability for them to deliver, where does the focus always go? On the board, right? With this board and that board. The truth is the work gets done by the executives who put this together. The work gets done by the Mr. Tlaminis, the work gets done by the Hapilwes at SANParks. So we have got this weird and wonderful opportunity to be the outside brains to support the executive at SANParks as they figure out ways on how to create a more sustainable business model for SANParks. So SANParks historically relied on government allocation, but in truth, we have an ability to generate income and create real value. Look at the products we've got. And the purpose of today is about showcasing that to the private sector particularly, and saying, hey, we've got all of these wonderful, wonderful assets. We're not commercial people. We are conservation agency first. So we are here to look after this stuff. But we can certainly create value for ourselves and for the country. Help us do that. So hopefully today, not only must we all believe that tourism is the right industry to be in, but here's this unique opportunity we've got as South Africans who own the best real estate in the world when it comes to tourism assets. The question is, how do we leverage that, and how do we make sure that we extract the right returns?
Yeah, very important. I love that. And also, one of the issues that I do want to talk on, as much as we want to get the investors in, and our parks are, I mean, it's wonderful. You know, it's there for them to come in, invest, and do, but we need to maintain authenticity of our parks. So it's finding that balance. So I really, the last thing you want is this glitzy beautiful hotel in one of our parks that just doesn't fit in there. So it's quite important to find the balance, but we'll talk to some of those issues. Wendy, I mean, I really, you really were the voice of the restaurant industry, and the restaurant industry was decimated at this time. If we talk about, at this time, a year ago, everyone was sitting at home, and we couldn't even get takeaway. We couldn't do a thing. I often thought about the fridges at restaurants and the amount of stock that was in there and the food that had to be thrown away and the waiters and waitresses and managers and owners, and suddenly just everything was taken away, and how hard that must have been. And how many restaurants closed down, our favorites that suddenly disappeared. That's just some of my thoughts that went through my head at that time. But for you, it's been really a tough journey, I can imagine. But there is a future, and we're seeing the light. So perhaps give us your opening comments as well.
Thank you, Len, and good afternoon to my colleagues and to everybody in the room. My lady, welcome to the summit. The restaurant industry is probably the most dynamic, energizing, creative, brilliant industry that there is to form part of the value chain. And without food, the rest of the tourism industry really is a shortcoming of what we have on offer. Food is what brings people together. It's a celebration of life. It is the port of call to holidays, to moments like today, to relaxation, to bring us together, to birthdays, to weddings, to celebrations, to all of that. And what we definitely saw through the levels of COVID was that we springboarded quite quick to recovery, because we are social beings by nature. We are integrated sensory beings, and we want to be in environments where we connect with people, we connect with food, and we engage our sensories and experiences that deliver some form of normality. So whilst we saw a lot of things being lost and a lot of restaurants in hardship, we also learned that we're such a creative, resilient, beautiful, brilliant industry. And I think we have some of the most dynamic individuals running restaurants today. In the 2 years that we were in lockdown, we simply could not run our businesses. We had to remodel our businesses at every turn to be takeaways, to be delivery services, to be bottle stores, to be coffee shops, the restrictions, and the innovation it took for restaurateurs to keep paying their bills, to keep their doors open, the negotiation. We are not great admin people by nature. We are people's people. We want to socialize. We want to create experiences. We want to bring food to the table. And suddenly we were filling our times with administration and looking at negotiating for better rentals and dealing with the banks and keeping lawyers' letters and legal components off us, which was critical to the success and the survival of the businesses. And the restaurants that really survived were those restaurants that had good relationships or empathetic relationships with landlords. Those restaurants that really struggled to stay afloat were due to poor visions from the landlords, who had an inability to actually be compassionate to the survival of it. We also saw that there were very stringent lending components that failed to keep the industry in a survival mode, which were all part and parcel to this. And then what we did really see is we saw this very truly South African culture arising. Suddenly we had to change our menus. Products were difficult to get in. Imports were difficult to bring in. The international products that we were used to presenting. And also we had to suddenly learn who South Africa was. We weren't reliant on the international trade. And we had to now learn our South African customer. And they were a completely different culture to the international market that we've been used to serving. And suddenly we learned how reliant we are on the value chain within each one of the little doorpies or the little country outlets or the interprovincial travel, and how important the domestic tourism was to the roll-on of the economy to survive in the restaurant industry. And we realized in that space how beautiful South Africans are and how loved the restaurant industry is. Food is the integration of society. It is really the pivotal part where we came together. The minute the curfew was lifted, the restaurants were full. The minute the alcohol ban was lifted, people were celebrating and clinging and shinging and popping champagne corks and opening ice-cold beers. And there was this camaraderie where we all came in a togetherness. And I look back in COVID and I think that the restaurants were intrinsic of bringing South Africa back together. And it taught South Africans really how to be integrated, to look at different ways of doing business and really to collaborate. And we started talking, a dialogue which was never spoken about. How big is the industry? what do we contribute to the GDP? What is SARTAX? What is our contribution to the alcohol value chain? What is our contribution to jobs, job creation? And we started opening up dialogues that were never spoken about before, and how important the restaurant sector is to tourism and hospitality, and how important it is actually to the greater well-being in South Africa, the cultural development. You know, often when somebody lands in South Africa, or even domestic tourism, your interface with the waiter is your experience of what cultural deliverances are. And through this, we learned about doing different dynamic things, and suddenly I found myself really traveling and doing roadshows around South Africa to understand what was happening in the iconic landscape of the top-end fine dining restaurants. What were they doing to survive? What did they need? Then we looked at the different layers within the restaurants, right through to township tourism, to container tourism, to looking at container restaurants, and to all these new pop-up restaurants, new experiential restaurants. What were people doing to be innovative? We suddenly saw that restaurants became far more outdoor. They really improved their outdoor capabilities to be able to have more people in their restaurants. We had to remodel the financial model to be able to support the investment opportunity. We certainly weren't showing any profitability in the business matrix that we were used to running on a restaurant, where it was looking at about a 20% ROI. We were suddenly now in a deficit because we were sitting and drowning in debt. So changing our menus, making them more profitable, looking at obviously changing sites, business sites, a lot of operations working from homes, doing more Airbnb, experiential dining to people's homes, home delivery from the fine dining operations. And what we definitely saw in December last year with the red alert was a complete collapse of how quickly our industry can be decimated at the pin drop of the restrictions that were placed on us. So when the red flag brought in, thousands of bookings were cancelled, corporate bookings, a tremendous huge value which was in well preparation. And I think this opened up again a dialogue to say, guys, don't just turn off the lights, you need to talk to us. We can't just close our doors. It's not a garage that you close or a food truck you shut down. There are logistics that need to take place. We, exactly like you say, we have got fridges full of food, expired stock. We need to chat to suppliers, landlords, staff. There's a lot of elements that need to be taken care of in preparing us for a lockdown or a shutdown or restrictive trade. And this came with little support, financial support from investors, banks, suppliers, landlords, and in some instances even funding that was presented that was available from government. And I think what we learned about this is that there are so many new developments that have happened in South Africa. We are creating a truly South African economy, and we had to learn what South Africans wanted. The holiday season in November, December, January really taught us about the South African culture. And we were, for the first time in the history of South Africa, in a truly South African economy. We had to adjust our models, and I don't want to speak for the rest of the value chain, but we had to adjust accommodation, we had to adjust food, the way we traveled, airlines, interprovincial travel, to make it effective and affordable for families to be able to go and to support. And we kind of just diminished and minimized what our true value offering was to stay afloat, to keep our businesses alive, and to be able to bring people into our restaurants and into our businesses. The truth is, what we've learned in this space is that we still in a very, very exciting time. As we've moved into January, February, we've seen beautiful restaurants opening. We've seen those iconic restaurants that are landscaped to international travel reviving itself. We see how Franschhoek has just rebuilt itself and how those communities and restaurant communities have stuck together. Mshlanga, we look at the Midlands exactly as the approach to all these different areas and nodes have worked together, and we realize restaurants can't survive in isolation without the extension of the value chain. And it's important that we collaborate, we talk about the continuous lobbying for lifting of restrictions to keep lines of communication open, to understand the impact we've done, and to support government continuously on what they feel needs to be done to minimize the economical impact on our industry.
Sure.
But moving forward, it's very, very exciting times. Some brilliant restaurants. We've seen the service levels improve tenfold. We've seen how resilient and dynamic restaurateurs are, how happy they are to be serving our patrons, how beautiful the staff are, that those who work in the industry. And we need to look at opportunities now to create jobs, to look at the densely areas, to put these beautiful container coffee shops in. We see a lot of container development happening, a lot more integration within hotels, guest lodges, Airbnbs, and we see that there's a whole new opening of of nature tourism. You know, people have started hiking and fishing and doing all adventure nature tourism, which I think is a really big component for us to be able to put that on the destination and international destination, and to make food available and to bring water into those areas. And part of getting to these certain restaurant nodes is also ensuring that the basics are met, that the roads are maintained, that we can get there by car and vehicle, and that there is cell phone signal on many of these high-end roads. And I think it's a very, very exciting time. I'm looking forward to 2022. It's dynamic times for us, and I think if we all work in an integrated space, we're going to see some really exciting opportunities arising. And for those restaurateurs, my dream is that we can reopen every restaurant and realign every job that was lost back into its space and time.
We'll get there.
Thanks.
We will get there. Wendy, amazing. Yeah, what an experience. I mean, to have seen that, no one in their wildest dreams would have imagined that would have happened. You know, I went to a restaurant. I have to tell you a story before I come to Chifiwe. I was sitting. You were talking about the waiters. Now, I mean, we know that a waiter is tourism. You talk about the fact that we walk around and smile. That makes us in the tourism industry. But a waiter is my best. So we went to a stunning little restaurant in Cape Town, and this was all during this time. And this waiter was so charismatic. It was amazing. And he started relaying a story very close to when the bill was about to arrive, that Jürgen Klopp was one of his customers, and he proceeded to tell us the tip Jürgen Klopp left for him. So I nearly swallowed my cup of coffee, not the coffee inside the cup, because I thought, please, my friend, don't even think about it. Let's get the borders open, and Jürgen Klopp can come back and give you that tip, because, yeah, you're looking at the wrong person. But I'll tell you what, I haven't stopped sharing that story, and everyone wants to go to that restaurant now, because, yeah, can you imagine? I ate at the same place as Jürgen Klopp. Why not? Why not? That's what we do. That's what we do. And that's where memories are made, and I'll never forget it, and that was so beautiful about it. I mean, Chifiwe, from the Tourism Business Council of South Africa, you've seen it all. I'm sure you have. I mean, tourism is what we're talking here. So give us your remarks as well.
Well, thank you for having me, and good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Minister, the board of SANParks, and colleagues from the industry. When we talk about tourism, we're talking about an industry that generates around or more than 400 billion rand worth of expenditure within South Africa. So you're talking about a very serious economic sector, of this country. And if you look at how many people tourism employs, you're talking around 1.5 million people who were employed in tourism pre-COVID. And of course, during COVID, we lost many of our colleagues because of the restrictions and that are caused by COVID. And you're talking about an industry that buys over 12.5% of locally manufactured cars. Talking about an industry that impacts the retail sector. About 15% of what's bought in retail is bought by the tourism industry. You're talking about an industry that impacts agriculture. You're talking about an industry that impacts many, many aspects of this economy, and that's vital for this economy. And Andile spoke about an industry that brings in money, an export industry. We are second to mining, which means that mining is the only industry that brings in more money than followed by tourism. So we are a very serious industry, and we are vital, in this economy. And that's why we always talk about the whole of government approach when we deal with tourism. Now, when you look at COVID-19, when it arrived in this country, of course, everyone talked about tourism or travel, bringing, people who have contracted COVID, by way of traveling to other countries and bringing it here in South Africa. So, of course, we're the first ones to be shut down. We had to scramble to get people who were in the country, count them, make sure that everyone get on the plane, make sure that they leave. Airports were starting to shut down. Airlines have been affected. The hotels, trying to account for who's at the hotel. The restaurants, starting to account, what needs to happen next. Car rental companies. All of a sudden, you have a fleet of over, 20 or 30 or 40,000 cars that you don't have one space to park them because they rotate. You have to find spaces to park these cars. We have to park cars, in the farms, and we have to cut the fleet to make sure that, we can downsize and make sure that, we can be able to survive. There are many, many people that have lost their jobs. And more importantly, there are many people within our own sectors that have lost their lives. Some of them due to the stress, some of them because of COVID. So when we talk about, the devastation from COVID, and when we talk about this industry, we have to talk about the people that we have lost and the people that continue to stay at home because of what has happened. So we've gone through COVID. We have lost many businesses. We have lost many entrepreneurs. But what's important is that we need to recognize that there are many people that are supported by tourism outside of urban areas. And this is where, the parks that we have and the parks that SANParks manages play a vital role in ensuring that the people that are around those communities are involved in tourism and they're able to sustain their lives. More importantly, the people that live outside of the parks and that do business outside of the parks. And these are the informal businesses that most of the time we don't talk about, those businesses. These are people that are, selling fruits and vegetables around the parks, people that are selling artifacts around the parks. When you're driving towards the Kruger National Park or any other parks, there are people that are waiting there that are selling. They too have been impacted by this, pandemic, and they too, probably more than many people, who may have a balance sheet, they don't have a balance sheet. They have to survive, and they have to, put food on the table for their own families. So when we talk about the impact of the COVID, we always have to remember the informal side of tourism businesses, as well as the formal side of businesses, entrepreneurs in tourism businesses. We have to remember, those that are running smaller establishments. We have to remember those, that are doing things that we may not see them as part of tourism, businesses that are quite important in delivering the experience of tourism. So the role of domestic tourism has been spoken about. That, when we put together the tourism recovery strategy, we said that domestic travel is going to be the catalyst for growth. Recovery is going to start with domestic travel. And domestic travel has a huge impact, on the revenue of SANParks. We spoke about 80% of the SANParks revenue or business coming from, travel or tourism. And I'm sure domestic travel plays a critical part, in that revenue line. So it's quite important. And we started by way of putting together protocols to make sure that we can operate safely, to make sure that there's trust in the system, to make sure that both domestic and international travelers can look at us differently and they can be able to say, we can go to South Africa. And we did that successfully. We're able to open, for business. One of the most important things, from our side is that the tourism industry has shown that it's resilient. And we've done so by making sure that as much as we suffered the loss of our employees who had to stay home without, any payments or any salaries, some of them had to sit at home with half of their salaries or, 10% or 20%. It shows that we are resilient because we are able to bounce back. We are in a process of rebuilding now. There's a whole lot more movement from the past 4 months. When we look at December, when we look at January, February, and now in March, from the numbers that we've seen, we are now starting to reach about 50% of what we were doing in 2019. It simply means that there is, a light at the end of the tunnel. There is something that's happening in the ecosystem of tourism. There is something that's happening along the value chain of tourism that's positive. And when we start to see the numbers that are better than what we were forecasted, it means that things are starting to look better. So we are bouncing back. We are a resilient industry, and we will keep building on that. And we are hopeful that we'll see, a better future. So that resilience comes with a lot of things that we need to look at. And of course, new experiences that we need to offer. And I think what SANParks is going to be, putting out today in terms of investment opportunities gives us that opportunity to say that there are new things that may come into the market, maybe new experiences, new restaurants, new offerings, new hotels, and new managers of those establishments who may offer different experiences, than those in the past. I think it's important that when we do so, that we need to keep in mind that entrepreneurs that are hungry to really contribute and bring new experiences to this industry are given a chance to display their capabilities and to ensure that they impact this industry positively. It's important that we include young people, especially young people that are around those parks, to make sure that they feel the sense of ownership. Not only the sense of ownership in terms of, I'm an employee, but also supplying into those parks, supplying into those establishments, making sure that, those young people that are trained are employed, within the ecosystem of those parks. So I think that's quite important. And that goes into the sustainability, of all these projects that we're going to be talking about or that are going to be, displayed. So for us in the tourism space, we believe that we are headed for a brighter future. It's not going to be easy. We still have international markets that are not fully opened. We still need to work on that, but there is a brighter future ahead. And we need to build it together, for the future of the tourism industry and for the sake of young people that want to enter the industry that cannot enter now because we're still rebuilding. But I think that the future is bright and we're headed towards the right direction.
All right, Chifiwe, thank you very, very much. Okay, I think we've got maybe about 20 minutes, Kaya, is that all right for me to just sort of do a bit of a Q&A? 15 minutes? 20 minutes, okay. I'm going to start throwing some questions. And so we've gotten the opening comments. And this is important because I think you guys have really laid a wonderful foundation for us to begin our conversation. But let's get serious in terms of conditions right now. In all of the, and I suppose I owe this to, I don't know who wants to pick it up, but all of us have spoken to the amazing ability that we need to attract people into the country. We need to take our tourism industry and make it bigger. Nobody's touched on the issue of safety. And I want to talk a little bit about that because we are our worst enemy in terms of scaring people away. Not only international travelers, but locals as well. You want to enjoy your country, but one of the big problems is the issue of safety. Can we talk to that? Because that falls into the future of our tourism industry. What are you wanting from government to assist on this behalf? Anyone want to take it? I mean, Chifiwe, being from the Tourism Business Council, anybody else want to jump in on this aspect? Because I think we need to talk about this amongst other challenges as well.
Well, just to come in there, I think one of the things that we have to do more of as South Africans is to talk our country up. More often than not, we speak down and we look at our problems in a way that we start to spread, the challenges that we have beyond, what they may be. And we create these perceptions and many things. But I think that, we need to change the narrative if we want to do better in terms of, ensuring that people have confidence in the destination. We have to continue and fight on to make sure that, we put the right messages across the world. And also we make sure that, us as South Africans are positive about our own country.
Yeah.
It's not all doom and gloom. There are people, around the world that are experiencing worse than what we're experiencing. But we need to speak up our country. We need to put the right messages. We need to make sure that we change the narrative. And this was spoken about at the investment conference here in Sandton last week. That more often we talk down and we are negative about our own country. So we've got to be positive. There's a whole lot to live for. We have gone through the pandemic. The worst looks to be over from what we're seeing and what we're working on. So I think it's time now that we rebuild, we talk about our own country. Yes, we've got challenges, and so many countries have their own challenges, but we're better off as South Africans. There's no other place that I would rather be than being here in South Africa. So we've got to talk up, we've got to do what's right, we've got to put the right images. Yes, we've got our challenges, but our challenges are not greater than our successes.
Andile?
I was just going to add that there's obviously the immediate, right, which is dealing with criminality. And I know nothing about that. What I do know, coming from the community I come from, is that criminal activity is often a consequence of a lack of economic opportunity. In other words, I have no other way, or no other thing that engages me, that occupies me. So when Chifiwa talks about engaging the communities around the parks, when Sis Lindiwe talks about the SMEs and jobs, and when my sister here is talking about restaurants, and when you're talking about the waiter who was convincing you to pay Jürgen Klopp's tip, for me, the way we all respond to the question you're asking is about ensuring that in everything we do, we create a larger base. We do everything as inclusive as we possibly can. One of the initiatives we're working on, which is in early stages, but I can talk about it without mentioning too many names, is about how do we, as SANParks, engage the communities when it comes to SME opportunities in the parks. How do we leverage that? Because I can't live in a community. I see all these 4x4s driving past all the time, and I know that big dollars are being dropped in the resort, and outside there I'm living in abject poverty.
Yeah.
So I think the long-term solutions to these social ills, particularly when it comes to criminality, is about creating economic opportunity. See, because then I have something to lose, Leanne. I have a job, I have a business, I have a family, I have kids I'm taking to school. I'm engaged in the economy.
Yeah.
When I'm disengaged in the economy, I'm tired of looking for work. I've been trying to get a business opportunity. No one lets me in. After a while, the devil finds work for those hands because they're idle.
Yeah, and that's the reality.
Yeah.
A definite a round of applause there, because if you don't wake up every morning knowing that you have a purpose,
Yeah.
what are you going to do? Where are you going to go? And this is the reality. So we need to create these opportunities. Lindiwe, do you want to quickly comment on that?
I think Andile
I think
covered me.
so. I
He
think Andile
covered
really
me.
did.
Let me just.
You want to add something? Go for it.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that we also have to be very clear about here, Lian, is that as a country, we need to be able to separate the semantics around safety and security. There's a big difference between safety and security. When you talk about safety, there are standard recommended practices that say when you do this, you are safe. Security is what Chifiwa and Andile are talking about. When you create a tenure of existence and belonging. So when these people that we are talking about are part of an environment that says you belong here, you have tenure of existence amongst us, not out there on your own, but amongst us. Then you are creating security. Because I'm secure in the knowledge that my future belongs to me today, tomorrow, and forever, with whoever I bring along with. Whereas when you talk about safety, it's a switch on and switch off. Because a standard recommended practice says, if you've done 1, 2, 3, if you have done 1, 2, 3, then you are safe. Security means that you are actually beginning to put in place a process that is not an event. And I think that is very important.
Very nicely put. Very, very nicely put. Funding. Let's get to the funding issue, because this seems to be coming up quite a bit in the questions. I'm summarizing questions we're getting, because we're getting quite a few through, so I'm just going to throw them into the panel. Here's one. You know, we talk about all these opportunities, and Andile, you spoke about it as well. It's well and good. I've got this grand idea, but where do I get the money to do this? Because that's the problem. So, what funding resources are available to tourism entrepreneurs, particularly emerging black entrepreneurs who have expertise but lack investment capital to invest in tourism products? Can I pass this to you, Ndiwe? Because I think this is also one of your passion projects.
Yeah, it's a difficult one and a sensitive one. So on the one hand, there are funding vehicles out there and institutions, your development banks, like the IDC, I think they're represented here today, who have different funding for SMEs, for different entrepreneurs, from medium to large. And it all boils down to those entrepreneurs, of course, having the right business plan and the right pitch in terms of making it attractive for it to be funded. You can also access in our industry, if you go to the National Department of Tourism, there are a number of funding platforms that are available. But the real problem continues to be the one of equity. That if equity funding is not available to our people, the playing fields will not change. Yeah. And inclusivity will continue to be a discussion point in terms of whether there is access to it. Controversially, very recently we had the Tourism Equity Fund, which was touted to provide funding for entrepreneurs who would, pitch ideas for big projects in order to be able to get into the fast lane and have access. It didn't get through, as we know, because there are some friends who made sure that that particular process was thwarted along the way. But we, I think, need to make sure that as an industry, we have different forms of funding that are available. Your smaller funding, which, as I say, can be found at NDT, your medium to large funding, which should be made available at our development banks, but more importantly, the collaboration, the partnerships between the private sector and the public sector in saying, here are funds that are available to ensure that when you structure a deal, when you have an investment opportunity, you're able to structure it properly, that it's not just debt heavy, but there's also equity opportunity. Now, usually the problem becomes collateral, and SMEs and historically disadvantaged individuals would be lacking, and the whole story of collateral really has to be addressed. So I don't think I'm answering it in such a way that says, here is the solution. But if we want to make our industry attractive for investment opportunities, it starts with good ideas. It starts with us being able to make sure that we support the smaller businesses with, as I mentioned earlier on, good infrastructure, innovation that should be introduced, accessibility to connectivity, so that when you're pitching an idea, it's a big idea. It's different. If it's in the agricultural field or in the national parks, that it's not the usual small business pitch of wanting necessarily to only sell curios or to have a B&B or to have a restaurant. And I'm not downplaying those, but really getting players to be in the fast lane into having access into bigger opportunities. So probably for me, I would say the burning platform right now is where do we access and give opportunity to equity funding?
Yeah, and I think that's what people are asking. I mean, we saw the president, Andile, I think you can also comment on this. I mean, we saw the president talking about this example of that, I think it was that gentleman who started his own business through the 350 Rand grant. The ice cream story, yes. The ice cream story. And I mean, Wendy, that would also speak very close to your heart. I mean, getting into the restaurant industry perhaps is a little bit more attainable for somebody that does want to start something from their kitchen and grow it and grow it and grow it. But what you're saying, Lindiwe, is important. It's not about you want to be a part at the fast lane as well. You don't want to just be surviving. You want to change your life. And people, that's what they want to see. And go for it.
Absolutely. And so I have something practical. I'm going to take a shot at something we can grab.
Okay.
Sell something. Equity, by definition, as Lindiwe says, is hard. Debt is easy. Banks, that's why banks give you debt all the time. You've got a salary slip, you want to buy a home, I've got the home as security, your salary pays the bond. It's not hard. I give you the 2 million to buy your house, you pay me your 2,000 every month. It's okay. And you are likely to remain employed, blah, blah, blah. If things go badly, I just get your house back and I sell it. Debt's not hard.
Yeah.
What's difficult is something my sister here would know, which is when I start a restaurant, almost nobody's going to give me that debt. What am I going to say? Hey, guys, I'm going to open a fine. I look at Alex in Bryanston at Gemelli. Hi, I'm a black guy from Lesotho. I'm going to start an Italian restaurant.
Yeah. And
give me money.
Gemelli.
And I'm going to call it Gemelli. And tons of people are going to come. No one's going to do that, right? So he now needs to find people with equity, with their own money to say, hey, this is a good kid. He's got a story. He's been a waiter most of his life. He's managed an Italian restaurant before, grew up in Italy, actually knows what he's talking about. Hey, I'm going to give him 5 million rand. So to find that money is just hard. Yeah. Maybe that's the first point we need to make, because I do know that government tries to come up with the schemes, and government should continue to try, because it's hard, right? So our state must help us. But because it's hard, it's not going to be something that most people will find. So the opportunity that I think, that I've seen other people, other entrepreneurs start with, is the opportunity to supply something, to sell something. So in this industry, Sis Lindiwe needs to go back to City Lodge and go, okay guys, we've got all of these sites. Just give me a report about what kind of products or services we're procuring from small business people. And if I need to supply her with towels, I don't know what you buy a lot, let's call it towels. And I can go and find the best towels for City Lodge, negotiate a really good price. I can go to a bank and go, look, Sis Lindiwe has given me a contract to supply towels for 100,000 rand a month. I buy them for 80,000. Please give me the 80, I'll buy the towels. Sis Lindiwe will pay me my 100,000 in less than 30 days. I can give you back your 80,000, I've just made 20. I do that often enough. I save as much of the 20 as possible. One day I can open my restaurant.
Yeah.
Sadly, in my experience as an entrepreneur, that's probably the best way to build equity. Start with something, do it for as long as you possibly can, build a brand and a credibility and experience and knowledge in that thing. Then it won't be just Sis Lindiwe. It'll be the Capital Hotel, it'll be the next person, and so forth and so on. So if you're sitting at home and you're a bit disoriented about what to do, try and find an opportunity to trade in something. Try and find something you can buy at a price and move it at a margin. And try and do as much of that as possible. Once you've got a little bit of your own, then you can go to lenders. You can say, now I've got a little bit of this, can I get a little bit of that? That conversation is a lot easier to have.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, indeed. I love it. Wendy, did you want to add anything to this?
I think, in particular in the restaurant industry, we often refer to as unskilled, and I think if anybody's worked in a restaurant, I think you're probably one of the most skilled people, said respectfully, because the diversity in the job that you do is so extreme. And I think it is a platform where many people go through the ranks in restauranteering and they learn skills that will set them forth to being able to being brilliant entrepreneurs. And I think that there isn't a great platform for us to be able to enable the youth to actually step into the restaurants. There is a diversification of skills that you learn: communication, problem solving, time, it's physical, you're learning about cuisine, interface, confidence. There's so many good skills that you do. And I think it starts at the beginning where we said earlier, we need to give people a purpose. And when people have a purpose and they can acquire skills, we can put them through a mentorship where they learn these skills and they're able to have experience that when they move into wanting to gain funding, or like you say, a loan, there is the opportunity for them to say, hey, look, I might not have something to give you, but give me something so that I can build a business. Many storybooks of success that are written out of restaurants from people who started right from selling sandwiches or doing something on street food or doing a container or doing a food trailer. And we don't maximize this opportunity. And I think the critical thing that we learned through COVID, in particular with the restaurant industry, is that in already a fragile, geared business model, banks were apprehensive to lend money to us, which put us in that compromising position already. And we're such a critical component to skills development, to job creation. And if a business is not properly funded and not properly geared, your success is minimal. Yeah. And in the history before COVID, the success rate on a restaurant was sort of 1 in 10 survival. Through COVID, we lost 50% in the industry purely because many of those businesses were badly geared. And the banks didn't stand up to say, right, you have a good concept. We understand the extension of the value chain that you support. Remember, a restaurant is a village. Yeah. We're not just a restaurant where you see tables and chairs. We have people who make sauces, menus, uniforms, tablecloths, they do chalkboards, the electrician, the carpenters, the extraction cleaners. We create so many jobs through the extension of what we do within that restaurant. So when a business closes like a restaurant, we lose so many more jobs, not just those physical jobs within a restaurant. And this is where the banks have fallen short in looking at opportunistic lending. So they just shut us down. And when you open a restaurant in the second-hand market, you can reopen a restaurant for a fraction of the price for the money that's been lost. And I think there's a massive investment opportunity here. There's a massive amount of second-hand restaurants sitting on the market that do need equity, that need investors, that need private investors. Those restaurateurs that have really survived have survived on private funding through friends or acquaintances that they know who believed, exactly like you say, to say, I believe in this concept, I'll put some money privately for you to survive. And I think we really need to look holistically at the Banking Association of South Africa's lifting of the red ban on the industry and making more money available at a cheaper price, provided that there's job creation, that we bring the skills and the mentorship into our industry.
Absolutely. Amazingly put. And I think that's one way of doing it. And if there's one thing that I keep on hearing repeatedly all the time, no matter where I'm going and listening to every single one of you, is partnerships. None of this can be done in isolation. Absolutely not. I want to quickly touch on, we've got 7 minutes left. I want to quickly talk to transport and access to these areas because, one, our roads are falling apart. Again, I'm bringing up something, and this is something that I'm seeing people speaking about on social media. I did the wrong thing by retweeting something, and then, of course, I get the Twitterati coming with their negativity. But it's not just negativity, this is the reality. I mean, when I drive up my road, I literally have to drive like that. And no, I'm not an Elam Doda. I haven't gone to Twitter to tell the minister that I got road problems, and he comes out in the afternoon and fix it. That's what kind of happens. But wherever you go in the country, it's almost becoming impossible, unless you have a 4x4, to get to one of these lodges or one of these places that you can go and enjoy it with your family. So let's be real. The other thing, airline industry, when we talk about transport. Firstly, trains, that would be beautiful, but that's a dream to take a train on holiday. Our train system it's fallen apart. So if we don't have a plane flying and there are potholes in the roads and I'm getting tires that are smashed all over the place while I'm on my way on holiday and it costs me 3 times the price to go on holiday, there's a problem. Then we ground airlines because they're not up to scratch. We saw what happened just 2 weeks ago with the grounding of Kalula and British Airways and what that did. I mean, it was devastating, and it still is. The pricing, you can't travel that way. The instability in the airline industry, perhaps let's talk about that now. I'm talking domestically, not necessarily internationally. We're not really worried about that for now, domestically.
So Leanne, you're absolutely correct. There's a challenge in terms of the transport element.
Yeah.
But let me correct you, because airlines are actually not in the transport industry. They are in the service industry. They provide a service. And when you look at the Civil Aviation Authority grounding an airline, it's not an overnight event. They have taken a lot of painstaking work to go through the maintenance, repair, and overhaul facility to actually get to understand what is the quality assurance circumstances. What are the safety management systems that are in place? Are you following through? Because, Leanne, imagine you getting into your 4x4 and the mechanic says to you, Leanne, get to the car, I've looked at it, you can get to where you're going, but I'm not too sure about the brakes, but you might get there.
Yeah, maybe.
That's the same thing. The Civil Aviation Authority does not take chances with your life.
Yeah.
The moment they detect that something is not right, they do the right thing. And we as South Africa must be proud. And for me, this is what is painful. When we are not proud of what we have done over the years, and one incident that is not even the fault of the South African Civil Aviation Authority is given back to them as a problem. For more than 80 years, we have been operating as a very secure and safe aviation industry, to the extent that we are only one of the 3 countries in the whole world where we had an airline that is almost 84 years old, and we have never had a problem in our own country, either as a crash in our country or a hull loss in our own country. But we are not proud of that. We don't say how good we are. For me, Leanne, that is where our problem is. We need to be able to look at ourselves in the mirror and say, well done, South Africa. We have done what a lot of countries in the world actually look up to us. I can tell you, Leanne, I've been to every one of the 55 countries on this continent. Did you know there are 55 countries in Africa?
Absolutely. No, that I knew.
I've been to each and every one of these countries. I've been to each and every one of these countries. Leanne, you and I were in Abuja when we started the South African Airways flight. You remember that?
I love that.
3 weeks down the road, what happened? They closed the runway because the runway was falling apart. Have we ever heard of any runway in South Africa being closed down because it's falling apart? Never. They bring their own aircraft to us to fix. South African Airways technically used to fix the Boeing 747s for Lufthansa to do a D-check. Leanne, a D-check is when you strip everything from start to finish, put it down, and rebuild it.
Yeah.
They used to bring those aircraft to us. We do not sing praises for ourselves. But we do these things. We are still doing these things right now as we speak. So here's my point, Leanne. I think that when we talk about the aviation industry, when we talk about transport industry, we must be able to start from a point of saying, this is what we are doing well. For us to do even better, we need to do a lot of other things that we can put in, but let's start by building from where we are. Because you don't have to be sick to get better. We are not sick. We can only get better from where we are because we're already doing these right things. So when the aviation industry, for example, contributes to tourism, tourism cannot say, because aviation is not doing things that way, that's why we're suffering. We must be able to say tourism and aviation, this is what we are doing together to get to where we want to be as South Africa Incorporated. So the final thing I want to say is, when we talk about you being able to get to Cape Town and you can't get to Tsitsikamma because the road has got potholes, Leanne, Andile spoke about it. The people that are living on the villages around Tsitsikamma, they go there every day because when they are sick, they get into their cars and they go to the hospitals. How do they go around those potholes? Let's help them to fix those potholes in very simple ways that say, instead of bringing the contractor from Johannesburg or from Cape Town, bring the contractor from that particular environment, train them how to fix the road. You don't feed a village by bringing fish to the people. Teach them how to fish. That's my solution.
Yeah. Well, you make it sound so simple, but we do. I mean, I commend everything. I don't expect anything less from the aircraft I get onto, and I'm not criticizing the airline industry for grounding those airlines. Rightly so. They made sure they were safe, then they flew. What I'm criticizing is the lack of variety of anything. If I can't fly, I can't do anything else. And the reality is, if we don't constantly keep everything under the spotlight and ask the questions, they're going to fall apart. So I think that's what holds us above every other African country, is that we refuse as South Africans to allow it to go down. If we don't scrutinize and ask the questions, they will. Exactly. And that's our job. We need to keep on doing that. And there's so many questions coming through. It's breaking my heart that I've got to almost wrap this up. I'm going to give you each a turn. Okay, literally a minute. Kaya is going to shout at me. He's going to fly onto the stage. Remember, he's from KZN. Yeah. He's going to shout at me. I can feel it. And I'm giving you 1 minute, but I also want one of you, wrap this up for me and add this in for me, because this is so important. Tourism labor is a critical partner in service delivery and return on investment, but tourism employment is still associated with some unattractive conditions like low pay, unsocial working hours, poorly regulated employment conditions. How is the industry ensuring that South Africans are employed, and how can employment conditions be made more attractive? Very important points in this. If one of you or all of you can maybe incorporate this, and also the issue of rural tourism, that's got to be a part of our future in a big way. Please, each of you, if you don't mind wrapping up in a minute or less, and in that, talk to me about how you see the future and how we better this. We were a little bit sick. Let's get better. Let's get better. I'll bring you last because I started with you. Let me go all the way to you. Begin, please, Tifiwe, wrap it up for me.
Well, I do think, and just to add, and I'm going to do this in a minute, if not a minute and 30 seconds. We do have a challenge with rail transport in this country. We need to fix it and make sure that we have more reliable rail transport that will contribute to the recovery of tourism. So that we need to fix. We have excellent network of highways. They are great, but we need to make sure that the roads that lead to the attractions that are tourism related and others, but I'm going to focus on tourism. We need to make sure that those roads are accessible and people can drive there. We usually have challenges in Mpumalanga and many other places, but I agree that those needs to be fixed. The by roads, the municipal roads, and many other places, do needs to be fixed. When it comes to the employment in the tourism industry, or the hospitality industry, look, this industry, it's about passion. We are not a 9-to-5 industry. We work, 24/7. And we have some of the jobs that may not look like, they fit in with suits and ties and things like that. That's part of our industry, and we need to be proud of that. And it's about passion, it's about service, it's about giving back and making sure that those that come into the establishments, are able to enjoy the experience that, they desire. There are people who wake up early in the morning to clean rooms, people who wake up early in the morning to cook food, to make sure that there are arts and crafts in the shops, people go to restaurants, and many other places. That is the nature of the industry worldwide. And of course, one of the things that's quite important, that's under discussion now, is the whole issue around people that work in the industry, whether they're from South Africa or not from South Africa. And that needs to be quantified so that we can discuss an issue with real numbers in front of us to say, do we really have the problem? What is the size of the problem? How do we fix it? Yes, there is a perception of that problem. It has been there for many years, but we need to deal with it from the factual side. Otherwise, we will err and we'll have things that we don't desire within the industry.
Chifiwe, thank you. Thank you so much. Wendy, wrap it for us.
I'd just like to end in saying, when last did every person in the room actually roll the words, "I'm proud to be South African"? And I think that's what it boils down to. We all need to take responsibility of our immediate, take accountability of the people that we serve and the environments that we work in. And I think we need to empower and encourage people to take part of mentorships, look at opportunities at this point in time. We've all come from a devastated place, and I don't want to be reminded of where we've been in our restaurant industry. And I think that there's so many beautiful opportunities to rebuild this beautiful country, and we need to stop looking outward and just look inward. And instead of looking at all the negativity, look at all the positivity, and together collaborate. And the other thing that's very important for me is consistent communication that is factual. I think that there's a lot of assumption. People have dialogues that are not based on content that is substantiated exactly like we've just spoken about. And these things lead to negativity and to hostility within communities with people that are not experienced or don't have experience in the industry. Most beautiful industry in the world to work in, most colorful, most creative, most dynamic. And if you're not up for more than a 12-hour shift, then it's really not an industry for you to be in.
Indeed.
But you will experience the most beautiful things in your life working in this industry. And I'm excited to invite school leavers and students and anybody who wants to make this their life. Yeah. And it's not a career, it is a livelihood that you step into.
It is, and that's what's so important. I started off as a waitress. Oh my goodness, did I learn every trick in the book as a waitress. I really, really did. And I also learned to tolerate people. That's a big thing. Andile, quickly wrap it up.
Thank you so much. So I want to end on something you raised earlier, which is a balance between conservation and tourism investment. And I want to say to you that the two have a very symbiotic relationship. We cannot sustain the security, the maintenance, the refurbishments required to make sure that the natural beauty we have in our country stays this beautiful without a model that can consistently fund that. Government can only do so much. With all the limitations and other priorities government has, you can only imagine what happens when economies don't grow as fast as ours. When things like COVID happens, the means are minimal. So what we are here for is to say to the investment community of South Africa and the world, your investment dollars and your investment rands are going into infrastructure that is the most beautiful in the world, best real estate. What we need is your support to underpin and augment that with commercial models. So when you go through the thing you scanned when you walked in here and you see all of the PPP opportunities that I'm pretty sure the team will go through, that is our invitation for you to participate, because there is no tourism opportunity without the beauty of our country. There's no concession at the Kruger without the Big Five and the opportunity to see them. The only way we can see them is if we conserve that. The only way we can conserve that is if we have a business model that continues to fund that.
Absolutely. Beautifully put. Thank you very, very much, Andile. Lindiwe, very quickly, you as well.
We didn't talk about environmental sustainability and the fact that water scarcity and electricity continue to be a big threat. We need to find ways, if I can piggyback on Andile's proposition, to ensure incentives are given to those who can come up with good ideas for renewable energy, solar panels, boreholes. It's a big thing in the hotel industry. We have a whole region in East London, in Port Elizabeth, Tabeja, where we are literally investing in boreholes. There's a business opportunity for those who are saying, where are the job opportunities and where are the pitches? Boreholes are never going to be needed as much as they are in our country in order for us to be able to sustain our businesses into the future. And so I would really want to say, let's not forget that. It's very pertinent to the national parks in terms of how that infrastructure around the parks supports creative and authentic and incentivized opportunities for our people to, first of all, have businesses, but also to live off in a sustainable manner into the future.
Amazing. And I think you touched the heartstrings of the Minister. I can see her writing notes feverishly over there, because that's what we're going to hear in a few minutes' time. The final word goes to you, Aaron. Thank you.
So I think the first thing is, Leanne, we need to talk about the 3 C's here. The first one is we must understand that we are a community. We are one community. We can't be 3 or 4 or 55 different communities. We are one community. We must build a community with one focus, and that focus is sustainability, environment, our people, the economy, everything that must be focused on one community. The second thing is we have to engender cooperation amongst ourselves. No man is an island. You can't do it alone. The SANParks Tourism Investment Summit is a typical example where we bring everybody together and say we can do this together. Here are the opportunities, let us cooperate. The last thing, and I'm glad the Minister is feverishly still taking notes, is that we have to have commitment. We can talk blue, we can talk all the things that we want to talk. If we don't have commitment to do the things that we need to do, we're not going to get anywhere. Thank you.
Wow, how lekker was that panel? Huh? Give them a round of applause. You were amazing, every single one of you. I'm not stealing another minute. Kaya, it's all yours. Thank you very, very much, everyone.
Thank you. I'm actually quite jealous. I would have loved to actually be on this particular panel because I think the type of deliberations that you had are quite insightful. And obviously we could see on Twitter, people are asking a lot of questions about, some of the topical issues. And perhaps the one issue that is probably more topical than any other today is the question of the hyperbole and, the populism that we hear where suddenly people can make allegations that, well, I walked into a room and 90% of the people were from a particular tribe without even speaking to them. And of course, that is problematic. And those are the things that we need to deal with. Yeah. But I think also quite importantly, for the tourism industry, I can imagine that the 500,000 job losses that we spoke about earlier on are the jobs that need to be recovered. And the importance of us getting those jobs back is that it at least gets us back to where we were in 2019. But quite importantly, I've always been intrigued by the high absorption rate of the tourism industry, where in any other industry, if I want to be an actuary, I need about 10, 20 years of investing into that education system. But this is the one industry that enables opportunity for participation for young people, not only to start off in accessing that employment opportunity, but as Wendy said, they actually learn the type of skills that a lot of us that focus on spreadsheets don't have. I know Andile used to be a spreadsheets man, so he simply had to, do a VLOOKUP, for example. But a person in the restaurant business has to be able to figure out why this man wants the water to be sparkling. I personally don't believe water ought to sparkle. Why she wants her wine to be sparkling and all of these things. So the type of skills that they learn are actually quite intersectional. And a lot of people tend to underestimate the nature of those unique skills. So I think it was a very important point that you raised them. But yes, the aviation industry, that extortion that we saw a couple of weeks ago is reflective of the lack of competition and the lack of diversity, and we need to fix that. So I'm hoping there's someone in here who's probably thinking that they want to buy and invest in a new aviation company. I see a couple of hands.
Oh,
there,
really?
At the back there. I see a couple of tycoons. So we definitely need that diversity, and thank you very much to this wonderful panel for giving us those particular insights. Wish we had more time.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So, of course, we're carrying on full steam ahead, and the one thing that this panel probably was quite ambitious about is that when they saw the minister writing, they assumed that she was writing about them. What if the minister was writing the new roadmap of how we're going to get all of these things done? Because clearly, in light of everything that we've heard today, and in light of all the issues that need to be addressed in this particular sector, there's definitely a lot of talking points. I'm particularly interested in trying to find those areas of convergence, where if a policy has been written with the best intentions, then those participants who should be activating and participating from that policy direction are able to do so. We have been accused as a country of creating the great paralysis where wonderful policies exist, and then at the implementation stage, everybody can give you a laundry list of why things don't work or why things do not happen. In a great reset like this, we absolutely cannot afford to have those particular hurdles being the impediment here. So that's definitely one thing that we definitely want to be able to get through. But of course, we are fortunate that we have someone who's going to be addressing us now who has a track record in getting things done that a lot of people probably thought wouldn't happen. And I remember when I first moved to Gauteng a few years ago, again, I'm from KZN, so those of you that are planning on visiting a particular part of the country, KZN is a place to start. It is the best one. You get to participate in the road tourism industry on the drive on the way there. Wendy mentioned the Midlands. I don't think she actually emphasized how beautiful that part of the country is. So all those of you that are planning your Easter trips, please do look into KZN. But yes, I once made the trek up to Gauteng, and when I got here a few years ago, Gauteng was undergoing a very interesting process of trying to say, the world is digital. South Africa isn't as digital as it should be. Particularly, public services aren't as digital as they need to be. So that e-government platform, that process of getting the state to be as automated as we all are, was a very important process that the minister undertook when she was still in MEC. And then, of course, as things happen, she made the mistake. When you do very well, you get promoted, don't you? So that's how we lost as a province, and she's now at the National Cabinet. The Minister of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment, Barbara Creecy, joins us now. Minister, over to you.
Thank you very much. That was quite a while ago. Wow. Community, cooperation, commitment, and sustainability. What a panel discussion. Let me start off by acknowledging the chairperson of SANParks, Ms. Pam Yako, and all the board members who are present with us today. The CEO of Isimangaliso Wetland Park, Mr. Sibusiso Bukosini, who just got in before you, Pam, with the investment conference in KZN. Tourism industry partners represented by CEOs, organized business and commerce representatives, ladies and gentlemen. It's just really great to be here with you this afternoon, and I've been going to events recently and saying how wonderful it is to be with real human beings, but I have to admit this afternoon that it's also wonderful that we have 1,800 people who are online and participating with us in this great event. So as you all know, this is the second Investment Summit. And the first Tourism Investment Summit was held in 2017 as part of the drive to attract a diversity of investors to its public-private partnership program. And I think the success of that first summit is evidenced in the number of new private sector partners that have since invested in several business opportunities in the tourism services in our national parks. And of course, it's also exciting that there has been this big increase, or there was before the COVID pandemic, this big increase in the number of small and medium-sized entrepreneurs who've also taken advantage of the opportunity to run businesses such as spas and retail and adventure activities. Now, today's event comes a week after the, it's 2 weeks now, I think, after the annual South African Investment Conference, which, as you are aware, this process was first launched in 2018 to support President Ramaphosa's drive to attract 1.2 trillion in new investments over a period of 5 years. And we trust that the opportunities that we are going to be engaged in today are going to help him in achieving his very ambitious investment targets, especially new investments in the ecotourism sector. Now, I think that the real issue that we are all confronted with today is how are we going to kickstart this very important aspect of our work coming in the aftermath of the pandemic. And I think the panel that we've all just been participating in really exemplified for all of us just how devastating this pandemic has been for the tourism sector. I was sharing with Pam a photograph which I took. I'm sure all of you have been to Skukuza in the Kruger Park, and all of you have probably been to that deck that overlooks the river, and there's a restaurant there, and it's one of the busiest places in Kruger. And on the 25th of April 2020, I went there on the way to distributing social relief to some of the communities that surrounded the park. And I was sharing with Pam this picture I have of that deck. And the restaurant is shuttered, and the tables and chairs are folded away, and all that is left on that deck are the umbrella stands. Even the monkeys weren't there. And it was, I will never get over that experience, because it really brought home the issues that I think we were airing in the previous panel on exactly how devastating this pandemic has been for our sector. And you would know that in that financial year, our department had to take R1 billion from our line function activities and plow it into SANParks. And I remember being asked by the portfolio committee, why did you do this? And I said, because I don't want to go down in history as the minister who had to put a for sale sign outside of Kruger. And that was really how bad it was for our institution. But as we have heard from the very upbeat discussions that we've been having today, this situation is by no means irrevocable. Not only are we extremely resilient as a people, but from the side of government, we have developed, and we spent a lot of time developing the Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan, which places the tourism sector as one of the 5 priority sectors that must be addressed and supported by government if we're going to move forward. And obviously, government in general, and my counterpart, Minister Sisulu in particular, would be putting a lot of effort into that process. And I think we see today's offering as part of that collective process. And we heard, I think, in a lot of detail in the panel, how the tourism sector is not only a labor-intensive sector, but we also heard about the many different value chains that it supports and the important multiplier effect that the different enterprises have on our economy as a whole. And I must say that I was really shocked to hear that as a result of this multiplier effect, it does account for about 500,000 of the jobs that were lost during the course of the pandemic. And together with, I think, the shocking figures that were released on Monday by Stats South Africa showing that we've got 35.3% unemployment in the fourth quarter of 2021, we've got to do everything that we can to make sure that we help this important sector to recover. Now, today, before I came to you. I was just down the road at the Sandton Convention Center, where we are hosting 500 delegates from an organization called People in Parks. And People in Parks is a representative organization that stretches across the country, and it represents all the communities who live on the outskirts of the protected areas in our country. And what was top of mind in that particular event is how these communities can benefit from the protected areas estate, and how we can help those communities to recover from the pandemic and deal from the extreme conditions of poverty and unemployment that are existing in those communities. At the moment, SANParks employs about 4,000 employees, together with its concessionaires, and who employ over 2,100 employees. So altogether, it's over 6,000 people are full-time employed by SANParks and the concessionaires. And over 80% of these employees are recruited from surrounding communities. And therefore, SANParks in many respects is one of the state entities that have a very crucial role to play in breaking this vicious cycle of underdevelopment in these communities. At the moment, with our concessionaires, we're spending in the region of about 75 million rand per annum on local community SMMEs. And this means that this money is going directly into those communities and helping to sustain other forms of economic activity there. Now, our relationship with our communities surrounding our protected areas has had its share of complexities, as I think you would all know, because the very existence of protected areas came about as a result of the dispossession of communities of their land. And what this means is that not only do our relationships with our surrounding communities remain complex, but it also means in all the work that we do, we have a specific duty and responsibility to consider how we are going to further involve those communities and how those communities are going to further benefit from the economic development in the protected areas. One of the questions I'm always asked by the media is, what are you doing about poaching, Minister? How many boots are you putting on the ground? How many guns are you putting on the ground? How many patrols are you putting on the ground? And I would want to say to you, ladies and gentlemen, that if we want to protect the iconic species that live in our national parks, and if we want to continue, as members of the panel have said, to be able to have that unique offering for tourists, the fundamental way in which we've got to prevent illegal trade and illegal consumption of wildlife is to make sure that communities have a vested interest in protecting our protected areas and have a vested interest in ensuring animals in those areas remain alive and healthy, rather than having a vested interest in ensuring that they are harvested through illicit means. So, with regard to land claimant communities in particular, because what you would understand is that in our national parks, we still have areas that are subject to unresolved land claims. While we've resolved many, many land claims since 2002, there are still some difficult areas where these are unresolved. And we believe that we can only successfully resolve these outstanding land claimants if we understand that these land claimants have to be partners in the management of the parks and in the conservation of biodiversity and cultural heritage. And this is where, as you will learn in the course of this particular investment summit, these partners are going to be integral to the way in which our public and private partnerships and our business models need to be shaped. This model also includes the setting aside of tourism products specifically for land claimants, a minimum of 10% share equity, preferential procurement and provision of the much-needed jobs, as well as sector-specific training, just to mention a few. So a thriving and successful and sustainable network of national parks is thus one that has a multiplicity of areas of high impact for economic growth. So while our core mandate as SANParks is the conservation and the protection of biodiversity and cultural heritage, we have to ensure that this goes hand in hand with community beneficiation. Biodiversity and healthy ecosystems are some of our country's tourist greatest assets. South Africa is in the top 10 most biodiverse countries in the world. And what this really means is that if you move from Cape Town to the border with Zimbabwe, you will go through many different biomes with many different forms of vegetation, many different forms of animal life. And this is what makes the tourism experience in our country so incredibly unique and so exciting. And it's what makes both domestic visitors and international visitors continually want to revisit areas of the country that they haven't visited before. And so conservation and tourism are interdependent in many respects, and when developed and managed in a sustainable and responsible way, tourism can be central to protecting biodiversity. Globally, we know that tourism revenue is indispensable to the funding of the protection of biodiversity, and it is therefore befitting to conclude, as we do at SANParks, that tourism is a biodiversity conservation strategy in the management of our national parks. This means SANParks, as the largest conservation entity in South Africa, is pivotal to the growth and sustainability of the tourist industry in South Africa as a whole. Now, Andile made an important point in the panel when he said that government can only do so much. So as we continue to reflect on the potential of South Africa's tourism industry, we need to acknowledge that its growth cannot be driven by the private sector or the public sector independently of each other. It is in recognizing and exploiting our mutual dependency that we can meaningfully capitalize on each other's strengths. In his State of the Nation address this year, President Ramaphosa issued a clarion call for government and the private sector to work within a consensus, wherein government creates an enabling environment for the growth of the private sector, a sector which, I must add, currently employs 80% of those who are employed. The harnessing of the private sector to enhance delivery is not new to SANParks. Pardon me. The organization has a 22-year track record of successfully managing public-private partnerships in the provision of tourism services. In the past 2 decades, SANParks has built a portfolio of 60 private-public partnerships, which include accommodation, restaurants, retail activities, an airport, and an aerial cableway. In these 2 decades, the private sector contribution to the sustainability of SANParks cannot be discounted. At the end of the last financial year, ending March 2021, SANParks Triple P cumulative income was 1.3 billion. And this has indeed been mutually beneficial to both SANParks and the private sector as a whole. To underscore this point, concession revenues in SANParks prior to the COVID pandemic showed a year-on-year increase of between 13% and 17%. The benefits that accrued to SANParks are not only limited to the monetary. Our private partners have contributed to improved service levels, innovation, commercial dynamism, and a divergence of product offerings. This, in turn, has allowed us to comfortably focus and execute on our core competencies. I'll just tell you a little joke that Pam and I often have, so that you understand this issue of diversity of tourism offerings. SANParks thinks that because you're in the bush, and you probably are not very clean because you're in the bush, you must always sleep in brown sheets and bath with brown towels. So we're very excited that our partners have white towels and white duvets and white carpets and things like that. So that's what we mean by diverse, fluffy towels, yes. Not those ones with the small Inyana cake of soap that you get on the bottom of your bed in the SANParks bungalow. Ladies and gentlemen, as we showcase the 100 business opportunities available in our national parks, SANParks is currently experiencing a recovery of our tourism industry. I must emphasize with gratitude that this recovery has been solely on the back of domestic tourism. And I must agree with everybody in the panel who was saying, as we move forward, let's not take our domestic tourists for granted. Let's work on that market, let's protect that market, because it is the mainstay of our recovery. We are also cautiously optimistic about a rebound in the international market. And we have to acknowledge that historically, the international market has been favored by us because it includes a higher spend and a longer stay. The World Tourism Barometer indicates that rising rates of vaccination combined with the easing of travel restrictions due to increased cross-border coordination and protocols are all helping to release pent-up demand, which we think will bode well for international tourism to our country in general. And of course, we are very much hoping that it will take an ecotourism focus. And so, ladies and gentlemen, we are optimistic that we can now look forward to the revival of the era where SANParks was relatively self-funded, generating 80% of its operational budget from tourism revenue, to an era where our private partners thrived in concert with us. We are convinced that this time is nigh, and I therefore confidently encourage you to explore the investment opportunities that SANParks is showcasing and assure you that the returns are guaranteed. I think it's appropriate to continue with this upbeat mood. To quote from the words of His Excellency President Ramaphosa, who concluded at last week's 4th Investment Infrastructure Conference as follows, and I quote, "We therefore invite you to be part of South Africa's growth story. We invite you to be part of a young, dynamic, resilient nation, positioning itself at the forefront of progress and change. We are forwarding ahead to transform our economy, to unlock our country's potential, and to create meaningful livelihoods for our people. And we are determined that in doing this, we will leave no one behind." I thank you.
Thank you very much for those words, Minister. And of course, this is indeed a call to activate what the President did indeed mention in his State of the Nation address, that we all should collaborate and work together towards reaching a much better consensus as a country than where we have been. And I think obviously for a particular department to actively engage in getting the private sector involved in really ensuring that the sector is indeed revived and remains viable is a very important step and is a very important development that should be welcomed indeed. And of course, this being an investment summit, there's always the question of, if I am to invest in this country, if I am to invest in this particular project, how do I know that the conditions that exist today will persist in the future? And of course, the policy certainty that people refer to remains a very important conduit of that. So we'd like to ensure that we have to have that line of march and that very clear expectation so that those that do invest know what it is that they're investing in and what the long-term outcomes are. So that's a very important element of this. And Minister, I suppose it's one of the very few entities that can say that actually when all things are working well, we're able to run our affairs on our own. Pam Nyako, I mean, 80% is the type of number that a lot of government departments wish they could cite as the definition of self-sustainability, but of course, unfortunately, this had to be the sector that was hardest hit by the COVID-19 pandemic. So we're hoping that not only are we able to get back to that 80% level, but perhaps even get to a stage where it could reach 100% and this becomes a completely self-sustaining entity. On that note, of course, this is ultimately a question of the intersections between the heritage world and the world of business. And to talk us through the dimensions of what exactly it means to be in the tourism business of SANParks, we are calling upon the stage the one individual whose job it is to ensure that every single day the wheels are moving slowly but in the right direction, and that is the acting Chief Executive Officer of SANParks, Mr. Dumisani Dlamini. Now, Mr. Dumisani Dlamini has got a very, very important surname because I was raised by the Dlaminis in KZN. So remember, of course, that's where everything tends to work. So it might look like an element of nepotism, but I can guarantee you that the Dlaminis that I know are the Dlaminis that are fit for purpose. The Dlaminis that are committed to the cause. And of course, this Dlamini is just one of those. And I can tell you now that he is a man who is known for doing the type of job that a lot of us admire. Mr. Dlamini, over to you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Kaya. I appreciate it. And good afternoon, Honorable Minister, Ms. Pam Nyako, Chairperson of the SANParks Board, the members of the board who are connected both here online and online, SANParks executive team, colleagues, investors that have actually graced this event. We appreciate you and thank you very much. So our vision is to manage a world-class system of national park connecting society. And we believe in that particular vision because we believe this in national park is an areas where people find tranquility, peace, and stability, and time to actually refresh. So if we can move to the next slide. Yeah. So this is quite a fundamental statement by the World Tourism Organization, which indicates that biodiversity and tourism is the greatest asset and it's natural capital and fundamental to the growth of, in particular, tourism. We view national parks as a national heritage, but not only that, but also global heritage assets, which have actually been enjoyed by whole global community around the world. So in the national park, we've actually using national park as tourism. Sorry, my apologies. So in national parks, it actually allows people to have access to our biodiversity as well as nature conservation. My apologies, I can't see that particular screen, so I'll use this one that I have here. So in SANParks, we manage about 20 national parks as well as 10 marine parks all across the country. We manage over about 4.2 million hectares of land, which covers about 67% of protected areas. So the World Tourism Organization made a very fundamental statement that say biodiversity is one of the tourism's greatest assets, and its natural capital as well as fundamental to its long term. There's no one who's so fortunate like all of us living in this particular country, with the mountains, the beaches, and the terrestrial, and the richness of the biodiversity that we have in this particular country. We have added many things into our national park, that's including issues of hiking, wildlife, in many destinations. What we have, it's a richness of biodiversity, which is both fauna and flora. What is interesting is that with the partnership that we've been having with our concessionaire since we've implemented about 20 years ago, it gives us an opportunity to actually experience things that you wouldn't necessarily experience in the bush. I mean, there's nothing that is so amazing like having an ice cream on the sunny area of Kruger National Park, having a fresh cheesecake in Skokoza. There's nothing that is so amazing like having a massage in the middle of the bush. That's what the partnership between SANParks and the private partners like investors like you do to our national park. And that's why we're having this particular summit today, so that you can actually join us in taking our national park to be a global icon, which is currently enjoyed by throughout the world. If you move to the next slide, you will see some of the pictures that our investors have actually showcased as one of the beauties of the national park. That's the following slide, which shows, for example, the Shelati train with such a beautiful swimming pool. And this is some of the things that you can actually experience in our national park. In the following slide, we do indicate that there are about 20 national parks that we have throughout the country, which covers about 4.2 million hectares of land. I mean, what you have is a key icon, Kruger National Park, which is also expanded to about 2 million hectares. As you will know, that Kruger National Park is one of the top destinations that people make a decision, even from the Western countries, to fly all the way in order to see what we have to offer. I mean, we are so fortunate that in the many years at SANParks, we've welcomed many visitors, including over 7 million visitors in our country. I mean, the pre-COVID numbers, it indicates that we've actually had about 6 million visitors, which have actually dropped to 1.9 in the last financial year. Obviously, we manage infrastructure. I mean, there's issues of service delivery, but not only that, SANParks also runs large enforcement units, especially fighting the scourge of poaching, which I think we all need to participate in. We are the largest self-owned and managed catering operators with more than 15,000 beds. I bet you will never find such largest operator, and we are pleased to be having this as part of SANParks. I mean, this particular slide, it shows the map of the footprint of our national park, all the way from the north, which is between Zimbabwe as well as Mozambique, and all the way to Galagad, the Richards Veld, which covers the borders of Namibia. And this each and every park at SANParks is actually unique. It's in all offering, which actually give us a much unique offers of experience. SANParks has been fortunate that in the last many years, we've actually grown our commercial activities to the extent that now our revenue covers about 80% of our budget. Not only this creates sustainability for the organization, but what is more important, SANParks is one of the state-owned organizations that have become less burdened and less dependent on fiscals. And thanks to people like you who are investors, as well as everybody who support tourism. Obviously, in the next slide, there's a quote from the World Tourism Organization, which indicates how challenging has been the pandemic, as well as the additional pressures on our road to recovery. You will know that between 2019 as well 2020, the global visitors who are moving around the world, they've actually dropped from 1.4 billion to about 381 million. And South Africa has been affected by the fact that about 71% of tourism have actually dropped. But we're so grateful that we've seen now with easing of restriction throughout the world, even in this country, we are seeing quite a good road to recovery. The next slide, it talks about recovery as well as positive slide. One of the things that which you should be excited as much as we are as the SANParks management team, is a high interest on nature-based tourism, as well as national park. Many people are moving towards spending their time in national park as well as rural areas. The second thing is that people find value as well as in traveling as well as personal time more than ever before. One of the things that we've actually been seeing, especially in many overseas markets, led by Germany, UK, US, France, that there's been a good interest of start moving all around. But I've also seen many governments actually having pressure to relax the restriction, which is now helping the tourism sector to recover even more. The downside of it is that there is actually a low capacity of airlines, in many instances other mode of transports, because obviously we're still building up. You'll see many destinations having only one flight, but we believe that as the demand grows, then we'll start seeing a more uptake of what is happening. Obviously, the demand is also subdued with many other issues that have been crippling the country. Obviously, the war in Ukraine is also affecting the fuel prices as well as oil, and we've seen also interest rate being actually hiked within the country, which has affected many people coming to our park, as we know that most of them you have to take a road trip. There are key uncertainties in 2022, and one of it, as I've indicated, is a possible war between Russia and Ukraine, and also we see a risk of many new variants that are emerging. We're so fortunate that we haven't seen any other new variant since Omicron, and we pray that it really remains the same. But also there are another uncertainty that we currently have is that what's going to be the development of a global passport vaccine. And one of those things that we're actually watching quite closely. And we believe those if we resolve those things, they can actually help us to recover much faster. In terms of the next slide, which is the recovery timelines, according to, again, World Travel Organization, there was a panel of experts who have actually checked what will be the outlook in the near future. And many of them, they expect that international arrival will now start returning to the 29 level, in particular in 2024, which is up from 45% from September. 58% of the panel, they believe that there will be a rebound later this year in quarter 3. And again, we are very excited about it. While 42% of the panel believe that the rebound will only happen in 2023. This particular slide, it shows the international arrival to South Africa. And mainly, as you can see, that many of the countries that actually support SANParks are European countries, in particular Germany, UK, as well as Sweden. The next slide, I'm almost finished. I mean, the indications, if you look at SANParks tourism performance, we've been seeing a gradual recovery, which we are excited as an organization. We've received a number of visitors despite having an Omicron, and we are very much grateful again from domestic support. If you look at our numbers, SANParks has actually, even as late as the third quarter, we received about 2.4 million visitors, up from the 1.9 million visitors that we received for the entire year in the previous year. Obviously, parks like Table Mountain, they are the greatest park that we receive many of our visitors, as it is a day visitors park. The next slide, it shows also tourism performance, as I've indicated, Germany being the largest supporter of SANParks, followed by the United States, France, as well as Netherlands. And again, Kruger National Park is got the largest overnight visitors, while Table Mountain actually shows day visitors. These particular slides are very critical for you as an investor so that you can see where to invest, because SANParks is a game of volumes, and the volumes are quite critical. Then this slide, we basically show also tourism numbers, how they've actually moved. As you can see that we really expanded it. We expect that we will actually exceed the trends that we experienced in the previous year. Again, Kruger National Park had an occupancy of 64% 1.9. And I can bet you, if you look at the tourism numbers around the country, this is more than the country average. Obviously, this is down from 85% that we used to experience in the previous year. All the other 19 parks, they've actually experienced about 49%, not far from the pre-COVID numbers of 56%. Revenue that has been generated from tourism activities alone within SANParks is 810 million up until end of Q3, which have actually exceeded our target of 803. And we are actually very excited about this performance that we have seen. This is my last slide. It's showing the trends of the tourism numbers for the last 5 years. As you can see, we had a peak of 7 million visitors walking through our gates. That's what was experienced before COVID. Obviously, those numbers have dropped to 1.9. We are currently projecting that by the end of the financial year, by the way, which ends today, we will receive about 3.4 million visitors, and we believe that we'll be able to achieve this target. So what we're saying to you today, welcome to this investment summit. We're looking forward to you picking up at least one opportunity, and please help us to shape the future of national park in South Africa. Thank you very much. Yes.
I think the most important takeaway from your delivery is the fact that we have a few more hours before midnight hits, and of course that being the end of the reporting year. Anyone here who still has an opportunity to go and spend the night away from home. Remember, we were told that the definition of tourism is simply you spending the night away from home. If you can, do not sleep at home tonight, because if you don't sleep at home tonight, we're able to actually count that as one contributor to the tourism numbers. And of course, this being 31 March, this is going to be a very important date. And I think the minister is always going to have an interest in this, because remember, we now have KPIs for our ministers. And of course, when this year ends, they hope that some of the different agencies under their portfolio have indeed been able to deliver. And I think, of course, there was that sobering slide that we saw there, the one that shows that great dip in the number of tourists that we've been able to receive into the country since 2020. And of course, that became the great reset, it became the great interruption, and of course we're all now trying to work towards getting back to that baseline and then doing a bit better, and investing in this sector is a fundamental part of that. So I do think that there was a very important reflection point that we saw them. 810 million rand, it sounds like it's a big number, but we all know it could be bigger. So again, do not sleep at home tonight. And if your wife or your husband ask what happened, well, you can simply tell them that it was an instruction that didn't come from Kaya, but it came from Kaya with the backing of an entire minister. So I think now that there's a backing of, the political leadership, you all have that very, very valid reason for why you're not sleeping at home tonight. But of course, talking about opportunities and talking about creating that greater sense of awareness and that sense of visibility is a very important part of the mandate that the team at SANParks has to execute on an ongoing basis. And a lot of people have simply said, we just know that South African tourism is much more expensive. And I also used to think it was, until last year. Guess what? My niece and my nephew came to visit, and for some odd reason, they said they wanted to go to Sun City. Now, historically, I would have said, there's Gold Reef City, so let's try that. But one of my sister's children, my niece, she's a bit of those new age kids. So she says that she wants to go to Sun City, and I say, well, it's far and it's expensive. And of course, I was defeated by the fact that she brought the evidence that said, well, no, actually, this is how much it's going to cost. And the most interesting part about that is that for some odd reason, she's 18. She didn't then choose a particular location. She says that she wanted to stay at the Palace in Sun City. Now, I've got a sense of horror, because my understanding is that the Palace in Sun City is the one time that I will go there if I then decide to get married, should that ever happen. So it was never part of my horizon. And then she brings it to me. She says, well, look at it. And I was like, oh, actually, that's not as bad as I thought it was. So for a lot of us, we used to think that these places were just priced at a different point. Maybe it's because of the pandemic. I actually did stay at the Palace last year, and I recommend it. So do the research, do the check. It actually can be accessible. And the one person person who's responsible for reminding us that these things are actually not as elusive as we think. The one person who has to keep reminding us that the South African tourism sector is an opportunity for investment. The one person whose job it is to actually then enable these opportunities that we all speak about is Hapilwe Selo, who's the Managing Executive for Tourism Development and Marketing at SANParks. Hapilwe, please come and address us.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, both here and joining us virtually. May I request that I ask that all protocol is observed? We have to catch up on time. Kaya, the next time you're in a public platform, please mention SANParks, not Sun City. Thank you. We shall invite you very soon and make sure that you experience some of the jewels that we have so that it can automatically just come to you as you're talking to people or in your major platforms to mention Kruger, Ado, Tsitsikamma, right? Yeah. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, mine is just to really lay the groundwork for a colleague who's coming later to take you through the business opportunities that we currently have in SANParks. But to do that, we just need to take you through a little bit of history of how we got here. So my presentation is titled The SANParks Triple P Journey. And more than 2 decades ago, that's when our story began, way back in 1997, when the then cabinet began exploring how Triple Ps could improve infrastructure and service delivery efficiency. And by 2000, SANParks was ready with a commercialization concept, which later evolved into a strategy in 2001. And that commercialization strategy, as we sit here 22 odd years later, is what is bringing us together. It has sustained us. It has been successful. We have learned some lessons. And because we're a learning organization, as we learn lessons, we incorporate them into how we do things and improve how we approach our relationships, our very valuable relationships with the private sector. In SANParks, you've heard that we protect conservation, and we protect and conserve biodiversity and cultural heritage. So as much as, yes, we are self-funding, this was pre-pandemic at a level of 80% of our operating budget, we are just not driven by the monetary results alone. Because we operate within protected areas, we have an obligation to practice what we call responsible tourism. And that is also enshrined in a strategy. Essentially, what responsible tourism is about sustainability, ensuring that we touch the earth lightly in whatever developments we make and implement within our parks. And most importantly, ensuring that we're inclusive. In our commercial activities. Previous speakers spoke a lot about the community. The minister made reference to land claimants. So responsible tourism is a very wide definition of not only sustainability from an environmental point of view, but also impact on people and ensuring that the outcomes of your tourism activities impact positively on communities. Let's just take a look very quickly at the rationale behind our commercialization strategy. What this commercialization strategy that, as I said, we've run for the last 2 decades has done for us is that, number one, it's helped us to diversify our tourism offerings. So the acting CEO mentioned spas, he mentioned restaurants. We have cable cars. We even have an airport in Skukuza. And these are things that are run by the private sector. These are facilities that, on our own as SANParks, are probably not at the core of our expertise and our competency. And in the process then of diversifying these tourism offerings, we have then been able to enhance the parks as destinations for tourists. Because tourism is about that. It's about what can I do? It's not only where can I sleep, it's what else can I do? And the private sector in particular enhances that particular side of the offering. We obviously have seen additional revenue. I'll show you the revenue in the next slide for funding conservation. The private sector, or I'll from here on refer to them as the triple Ps, which is public-private partnerships, have also helped us accelerate industry transformation. And I'll touch on that a little bit more as we go along. And the other very interesting element that you need to keep in mind is that some of our triple Ps have come on board not to run new businesses per se, but in some instances have taken over state-owned assets which were underperforming. So we have now a situation where we have optimal use and return out of those underperforming state assets as a result of our relationship with the private sector. And we do believe that as I said, it's about our competencies. It's about us also staying on our lane or in our lane. And where necessary, we have to recognize that the private sector can bring a certain level of innovation and creativity in the manner in which they deliver products. They also bring as well their own private capital, which then helps us to, as SANParks, to reduce the delivery cost of tourism amenities. All in all, a very powerful relationship that we have, a very significant relationship that we have with the private sector. So we currently have 60 triple Ps in operation. We have 5-star lodges, as has been mentioned, a whole variety of activities, accommodation, restaurants, and retail. And I think, and we believe, a very enhanced visitor experience overall. We have earned, in those 2 decades, give or take, cumulatively, a total revenue of approximately 1.4 billion. And that is the monetary benefit of the relationship we have with the private sector. The minister made mention of the number of jobs. She also made mention of the SMME spend. But in addition, there's also the infrastructure development, where the private sector in particular has come into greenfield projects and has built assets from the ground. So where we currently sit, we count the infrastructure development value that have come out of our triple Ps at 955 million. I'll skip this graph, but it basically just shows you essentially pictorially how the returns have grown over the last, give or take, 20 years. We are a state entity, so we never go far before we start speaking about legislation, the legislative framework in which we operate in, and that's very critical because that's our mandates are rooted in law. And in this instance, the National Environmental Management of Protected Areas Act, we call it NEMPA, actually has a whole section that speaks to nature-based tourism within the Act. And we are mandated, therefore, by law, to create nature-based tourism activities in our parks. Later on, there will be a colleague from National Treasury who will also make reference to regulation and governance, just so that you have a better appreciation of this legislative legislative framework. So what is a triple P? It's a commercial transaction between us, or between government and a private entity, in terms of which the private party performs an institutional function on behalf of government. And in this instance, we're talking SANParks. That private party assumes substantial financial and operational risks in the process by using state property. However, they do receive a benefit, oftentimes major benefit, for performing a SANParks or any government function, or from utilizing the state property. Very quickly, just to give you an overview, because timing is a very critical thing. A lot of people who are watching this will probably think, so when do we start? These are very exciting opportunities. When can I open my business? It is a process. And that's why I spoke about the legislative framework. That's very critical. So there's a lot of governance that comes into the process. Overall, I would say it's a 5-step process, starting with project inception and preparation. And then we have to go through a tender, a public tender. So procurement does not happen underground. It's a very public process that can be opened, that is open to scrutiny at any given time. Once the successful tenderer has been appointed, there is the issue of development. And as I've said earlier on, there is brownfield and greenfield opportunities. So in particular, when you talk about greenfield opportunities, this is where the land has never been disturbed. If you have to build in a place where there's never been any type of development, that's greenfield. The EIA process kicks in. That's what the law mandates. And that also has its own timelines. Once that is done and all boxes are ticked with the greenfield, then construction may begin. With a brownfield, obviously, it's an easier and quicker process. But it's not to say that you have to be dissuaded or discouraged that possibly a greenfield project may take longer. But nevertheless, it's absolutely critical that we manage your expectations from where to go. 20-odd years later, we are now at the point where we say we are introducing a new era of triple Ps in SANParks. I don't need to cover half of the points I have on this slide because a lot of people have said a lot of what is appearing here about tourism being a job creator and a driver of sustainable socioeconomic development. There's been talk on this stage about inclusive growth and so on and so forth. And we believe as SANParks, because we're the largest state entity in tourism, that we have an obligation to transform the tourism industry in South Africa. We believe we are well poised to do that. Therefore, in the new era of our triple Ps, we are going to have a leaning towards enhancing our requirements from a BEE or triple BEE proposal point of view. We are going to be a bit more emphatic in terms of our requirements from the private sector about their plans for skills development, skills transfer. The minister covered those issues as well in her speech. The issue of land claimants, well explained as well in the minister's speech. Those are our fellow, shall I say, landowners in most of our parks. They cannot be ignored, and therefore we have to create business models that create sustainable income flows in some form for these communities, the land claimant communities. We also want to see, we keep mentioning procurement from SMMEs, very critical. And I think one of the panel members, Mr. Kumalo, was very emphatic on the role of SMMEs. So we're just not throwing these words around and bending rhetoric. These are elements of or interventions that we do know, if our private partners embrace in the manner that we hope they do, will make a significant impact and difference in this country. So when you come into a relationship with us, you bring your technical expertise, you do the diversification of products. We expect that you have access to markets. You obviously have done your homework in terms of funding. That you will operate and maintain the product in line with responsible tourism standards. So you don't build a lodge in the Kruger and manage it like it is in Sandton. There are specific requirements that may require you to go a little bit further. You are responsible for all your marketing activities, but then you must also remember that some of these destinations, a lot of our parks are iconic names. So in most instances, half the marketing is done for you already. We expect you to pay a monthly fee in terms of triple P fees, which is either a minimum fee that we agree upfront at contractual stage or a percentage of gross revenue. We want you to touch the earth lightly, and we need, as you propose to us, your business, your bankable business, that you commit to the upliftment of local communities. We need to see that through recruitment of people from these communities, skills development, enterprise development, because this is absolutely crucial. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to end here and hand over to the next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hapilwe, for giving us those insights into how these partnerships actually work. It seems like we've been sitting down for a very long time, and of course a lot of people have become used to sitting down during virtual meetings, but this is not a virtual meeting, it's a physical one. So I do think at this time we can actually take about a 5 to 6 minute break, just to walk around and stretch our legs, and when we come back, we are going to be deliberating on the models of actually activating on these investments in greater detail. We'll see you in 5 minutes.
Taking scenery, endangered animals and plants found nowhere else. This is South African National Parks. With 20 national parks in 7 of the 9 provinces under SANParks custodianship, we have something for everyone. SANParks is the largest conservation entity in Southern Africa and is responsible for close to 70% of South Africa's protected areas, which includes over 4 million hectares of land and sea. World-class scientists apply state-of-the-art conservation techniques to protect the biodiversity in our parks. The operations of SANParks are founded on 3 core pillars, which are conservation, responsible tourism, and socio-economic transformation. Through protecting the environment and providing tourism opportunities, SANParks ensures that the people of South Africa and the world benefit from and connect with our national assets. The parks offer an impressive array of accommodation, including camping, secluded hideaways, chalets, and high-end lodges. The activities in our parks are exciting and exhilarating for any traveler, young and old alike. The sustainable and responsible tourism practices that we implement in our parks are of the highest quality, and the income generated through tourism funds supports our core mandate of conserving biodiversity and cultural heritage. SANParks inspires and connects society to nature. Visit SANParks.org to learn more about our world.
It's been a very long day, but thank you very much for rejoining us, particularly on the virtual platforms out there. And of course, if you'd like to hashtag, our hashtag for the day is Invest Tourism, and our secondary hashtag is Invest SANParks. We are, of course, carrying on deliberating on the nature of the models that we can put together in order to facilitate investment into our tourism sector, and of course, to look at some of the opportunities that already have been put together and how you can possibly look at some of those models and decide which one works best. We'll also obviously be putting this on the SANParks website on sanparks.org. It's already available for you to be able to look at some of the case studies that have indeed been put together. But to give us some granular insights into some of those, we are now going to call on the stage Ms. Annemie van Jaarsveld, who's the General Manager for Business Development Unit at SANParks. Over to you, Annemie.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Just a couple of protocols. The Honourable Minister, Ms. Barbara Creasy, I'm not sure if she's still here or whether she's left. The SANParks Board Chairperson, Ms. Pam Yaku, and other board members present. Then the SANParks executive members, the acting CEO, as well as all the other executive members. And then, like I said, all other protocols preserved, and in particular, a very big welcome to our current concessionaires and mostly our new potential investors. Very exciting to meet up with you today. So as it's been said, over the past 22 years, SANParks has developed, sorry, I just want to get the technical thing right. Apologies for that. No, I don't want that. Oh, so must I do it in this one? Apologies for this. It seems like there's a disconnection between this little thing and that thing. Just now, I got these are working. I mean, wait, if you enter it, there it is.
This is forward. This is forward, and then this is back.
You just go to the beginning?
Forward and back, forward and back. Do you need this?
No.
I didn't know, I had to learn.
Okay, colleagues, we've sorted it out. Sorry for that technical glitch. Obviously, the purpose of the discussion or the presentation today is to showcase the new available opportunities at SANParks. There's quite a large number of opportunities, as you can see on the screen, 123 in 40 national parks. Ideally, there's going to be a number of national parks that you've not been to before that I'll introduce to you. I don't know where Andile is. Oh, here he is. I'm going to showcase some of new parks for you to visit. Okay. So over the last 22 years that we've been talked about, a number of 60 PPP projects across a wide range of projects. One that the previous members did not speak about is the most lately golf course that's been outsourced at Kruger Safari Lodge. So our partnerships with our private sector investors. Okay. Our partnerships with our private sector entities has been pivotal in enhancing the experience of tourists who visit our national parks. And it's through these partnerships that we've been able to provide a vast array of facilities that are vital to enriched tourism experience. So the new pipeline of PPP opportunities, as I said, 123 in 40 national parks, will be implemented over the next period of 10 years. It aims to fill the major product gaps to widen the appeal to our new markets while ensuring that the principal draw cards of our parks are not diluted and we continue to hold appeal for our loyal traditional markets. So there's the products across a range of accommodation, restaurant and retail activities and other. So we're looking at a number of our dependencies. I think, Kaya, you mentioned the elephant in the room, which is the Triple PFA. I don't want to talk too much about the Triple PFA, but I think for purposes of our virtual listeners and members of the private sector that are not aware of what the Triple PFA is, obviously the Preferential Procurement Policy Framework Act is what it's a procurement sort of regulations that organs of state have to comply with when you do supply chain development and also PPP implementation. So in 2007, there were regulations that were promulgated, which unfortunately had some ring fencing sort of initiatives to it, pre-qualification based on black economic empowerment or level of or size of service providers. And on the basis of such, the judgment delivered by the Supreme Court of Appeal declared them invalid. The Minister of Finance had a year to correct them. On 16 February 2022, the Minister of Finance and Concord judgment issued an advisory note that advised that all tenders advertised prior to the 16th of March can continue. All tenders advertised on or after the 16th February, must be held in abeyance, and no new tenders are to be advertised. So we received a further advisory note saying that we can apply for exemption for specific reasons why we cannot wait for the Constitutional Court's guidance. But such exemption will only be granted on the basis that no pre-qualification is set or BE or level or size of operator. On the 10th of March, the draft preferential procurement regulations were published for comment, and the private sector, everyone has until the 11th of April to comment. Now, this is for SANParks. It's not good for SANParks because obviously our transformation initiatives and objectives are seriously impacted by this. So we're hoping that the Constitutional Court advice is pro some of the ring fencing that we require. And then also in terms of force majeure, SANParks has completed phase 1 and phase 2 of force majeure. And some financial impacts was provided, financial relief, was provided to the operators based on the lockdown and also the imposed travel restrictions. And whilst extensions were considered during phase 1, there are further extensions that we may be considering in June, which may affect the implementation dates of the new PPPs, in particular when it comes to the retender of the lost concessions and so forth. In terms of the prioritization of the projects, obviously the interest shown by the private sector needs to be registered with SANParks. The demand by the private sector will result in the prioritization of the projects for implementation. And then obviously we have to take into account our internal implementation capacity. We only have 5 project managers, but we have undertaken a process to appoint transaction advisors for the KMP retenders, and we are also busy with an additional procurement for a panel of transaction advisors to accelerate the implementation of new PPPs. So there's the range of activities that we've spoken about before. I'll get it now, I promise. Okay, so we're going to look at the 123 opportunities across the 14 national parks. Unfortunately, there's a large number of opportunities available I want to touch upon each and every one, although it will be very brief. You must remember that interested parties, private sector partners range from large operators to the very small operators, and therefore I think that all opportunities in all national parks must be presented to the audience today. So we start with Addo Darlington Lodge in the Addo Elephant National Park as an existing farmhouse in the Darlington section and close to the Darlington Dam. In Agulhas Lighthouse Precinct, there's an opportunity to operate and maintain a retail shop and a restaurant, as well as any of the 3 vendor stalls as commercial tourism adventure facilities. In Ugrabis, we're outsourcing units 1 to 17 of our normal accommodation for purposes of an exclusive lodge or a 5-star product. By making changes to the units, a different market could and would be attracted to Ugrabis. Further, to construct a suspension bridge over the Ugrabis Gorge below the falls in order to increase the visitation to Ugrabis in dry periods. Eco-adventure activities, which could include abseiling, rock climbing, quad biking, hiking trails, and so forth. Bontebok National Park, the Stroom Functions venue with related tourism activities. In Kamdabu, Driekoppe 4x4 trail and rusty camp, outsourcing of a whole camp, plus the opportunity to provide bigger tents for families. Then Lakeview tented camp and Winterhoek guest house, inclusive of walks and game drives. In Knysna, obviously the Garden Route National Park has 3 sections, the first being the Knysna section of the Garden Route National Park. Accommodation establishments could be purchased, as well as a hotel alongside the estuary. There's treetop units at Harkerville Forest. There's also a house at Brenton on Sea, a guest house, which could be purchased. A 5-star luxury houseboat experience on the Knysna estuary. Luxury short-term mobile tented camp events in Diepwalle, Harkerville, and Brenton coastal area. Harkerville campsites, each with its own ablution and kitchen area, located on the edge of the forest. Motorized flotation platforms for caravans in the water in Knysna and Swartvlei. So guests come with their own caravans, and they can overnight on the flotation device on the estuary for a day or 2. Then Thiessen Island. Thiessen Island, there's an event space next to the existing restaurant, which provides itself for events and functions, weddings, possibly concerts, and so forth. Then a wedding and an event vessel, possibly a luxury mega yacht, to be moored alongside the public Thiessen Island facility and to be used for major events and weddings. Then the Garden of Eden Precinct as a development of refreshment, business and possible retail opportunities. Then trail activities in the Garden of Eden to Diepwalle, which is 4 horse trails and 4x4s. And then the aquarium and conference venue on Thiessen Island on the existing plinth there, a 3-story development with the aquarium at the bottom. Then Thiessen Island specifically is a project we've been working on for a long time. We put it out on tender prior to the World Cup. Unfortunately, at that time, investments were already sort of geared towards other tourism facilities which would have been ready for the World Cup. So we got no interest, but we're putting it out again. So the accommodation facility provides for either a boutique hotel or also accommodation apartments, which research has indicated that there is a huge demand. And then also an existing restaurant which will require upgrades. In the Tsitsikamma section of the Garden Route National Park, an aquarium to display various types of aquatic animals and plant species, a boat cruise in the ocean to enjoy the sunset, a cable car, interesting one. The park does not have enough parking close to the restaurant in Storms River, so an opportunity exists for a cable car that can transport guests from the gate down to the bottom of the restaurant and obviously back up again. Then also guided dolphin and whale watching in certain areas of the marine protected area, a 4x4 trail in Soetkraal, a suspension bridge walking trail with a zip line, so there's opportunity to develop a suspension bridge from the big trees in Tsitsikamma to include bird watching, etc. And then from the viewpoint, a zip line across the Storms River mouth gorge back to the restaurant area. Then there's water-based activities, windsurfing, diving, parasailing, snorkeling, scuba diving, etc. Wilderness section. Wilderness section of the Garden Route National Park is accommodation facilities in town, guest cottages at Mother Holly and Pitt, tree houses in the Goutveld Forest, camping decks at Millwood Hut, solitude camping sites at Goutveld Forest, and so forth. Then a pop-up restaurant at the Tarantal day visitors enter during peak seasons, as well as a pop-up shop during the peak periods. Then canoe trails on the Tow River, 4x4 trails in Farley, horse trails at Beervlei, paragliding activity at Kleinkrans, a treetop walk in Goutveld Indigenous Forest with bird hides, a Tow River Mile, which is a swimming mile event to be held in the Tow River, fishing charter, catch and release in the Swartvlei, and then a functions venue in the North Camp when the camp is closed when it's off season. Can be used for private events or functions. Golden Gate, Highlands National Park, glamping accommodation, tented accommodation at the Belgedacht site. To refurbish and to operate the Maluti site, which comprises of a guest house with 4 bedrooms. 4x4 trail in Golden Gate with the refreshment offering. And then sports tourism. There's a huge demand for sports tourism. Golden Gate, with its open plains, provides itself for such sporting events. So the appointment of a event management company to do races, marathons, ultra marathons, family runs, cycling races, etc. Then the Kruger National Park, a large number of opportunities. Punda Maria Treehouse, which is on the immediate pipeline, providing we get PPPA guidance. So it's a unique experience in treehouse accommodation in the Punda Maria area. Then the Pafuri Camp, which includes the Pafuri Border Camp, the existing facility. It includes the Pafuri picnic site, then also a premium camping site next to the Pafuri picnic site, and a walking trails camp. Sabi River guest houses. SANParks is in the process of revamping 4 of the management houses where the staff is actually staying on the banks of the Sabi River in Skokuza, and to develop them as guest houses. Then private and group camping, there's an opportunity for SMMEs to apply for mini concessions to construct and manage the off-the-grid eco-friendly camping facilities at selected camps in the Kruger National Park, being Lower Sabi, Satara, Letaba, Shingwesi, Punda Maria, Marula, and Mupani. Then also renting of camping equipment from the gates and the main rest camps for people that want to camp, but they do not have camping equipment, or alternatively they haven't brought it with. Then Masurini Cultural Heritage Camp, which is 12 kilometers from the Palabora Gate. The Shangoni Cultural Camp, a 30-bed cultural camp close to the new Shangoni Gate, still to be developed. Then the Reenvoel and Dam tented camp, overnight accommodation, tented accommodation at the Reenvoel Dam. Then tourism accommodation. SANParks is in the process of investigating a funder rights or user rights model, which is where investment is required for the building of new infrastructure or the maintenance of existing infrastructure in return for user rights of that facility. So we're still busy with that investigation, a program, and we'll inform accordingly. Then spas, wellness facilities in Kruger National Park to host service camps in the north of the park, being Willifans, Letaba, Mupani, and not limited to those either. Then quad bike trails. Then the mountain bike trails, SANParks is developing from identified rest camps, adventure motorcycling, which is now a new niche for adventure motorcyclists who would like to combine the bush experience and the motorcycle experience into one. Then a virtual game drive, boat cruise or floating deck on the Pioneer Dam at the Bopani Rest Camp. And then the Kruger National Park is rich in cultural heritage assets, and so there's opportunities that exist to provide such related products and experiences to the private sector. Underground hides at the Pioneer Dam. This product will cater for niche markets like photography, whilst providing guests with unique game viewing and bird watching experiences. Then the Matakanyan picnic site. The Matakanyan Hill is a very popular viewpoint, offering magnificent views of the surrounding landscape, and the opportunity exists to build a picnic site at the bottom of the hill and the walking trail up to the viewpoint, and then it can also include a kiosk facility. Then food vending. Vans with food and beverage at gates and star villages, excluding the main rest camps where there are already service providers. Branded environmental friendly water dispensing. Then the Palabora activity hub on the periphery of the Kruger National Park, a very large development. I'm not providing too much detail, but it will offer a diversified range of activities: archery, mountain biking, microlight flights, spa treatments, mining, game drives, cultural tours, and so forth. Also from an accommodation perspective, a backpackers lodge, mobile tented safari, and as well as an overland area. Then Pabeni precinct, adjacent to the Pabeni gate, for the development and the operation of educational products and operation of numerous activities, including team building, adventure activities, biking trails, and so forth. Then the sale of wildlife products and Greater Kruger game meat sales. As you may be aware, we have a registered abattoir in the Skuta meat processing facility, and it can be used for various opportunities, or for the sale of wildlife and sale of products in the Greater Kruger area. And then there's also an opportunity for warehouse and logistical hub and staff accommodation. Then the Skukuza Safari Lodge is an existing lodge already built in Skukuza, a 256-bed development. SANParks is currently operating it, but it will be going out on a management agreement for a period of 10 years, also as soon as the PPFA regulations have been sorted out. Then we have a number of lodge concessions that are nearing the end of their term in the next couple of years. So they will be re-tendered. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but as you can see, there's 7 of them, ranging from, I can't see what it says, but in any case, ranging from, still not. But in any case, you can see them there. The name of the concession, obviously, like Lokashle or Mutlamubi or whatever, and currently operated by the private sector, and their names are also on the right-hand side, but all of those will be put out on re-tender pretty soon. As I said, we're almost in conclusion of the appointment of those transaction advisors. Then Marakele National Park, chalets, self-catering units. The park only has tented units, so chalets will attract more clients not interested in tenting, and there are provision for 40 chalets made at 2 sites. Then also a 30-bed halal lodge that will focus on requirements as set by the Muslim community, so a halal restaurant and prayer facilities that will form part of the development. This came from research that was done that reflected interest, and Marakele was thought to be the best park to do it, as due to the close proximity to Gauteng. A further lodge on a newly purchased piece of land can be upgraded and managed as a lodge. The current shop has to be renovated and extended. There's a day visitors facility inclusive of a swimming pool and a recreational area. Then development also of an activity hub at Marakele, activities can be undertaken from there. Hiking, running trails, horse riding, clothing, etc., etc., etc. Then backpacking, hiking trails, and then there's 52 kilometers of gravel roads that needs to be upgraded, as well as 80 kilometers new roads, and it's possible that we can work something out on the user rights model. Then Mapungubwe, upgrade and operate a number of the accommodation establishments in Mapungubwe, like Chuguru and Little Mog lodges, and potentially a new lodge and restaurant to be developed at Kruger Dam. Building of a replacement treetop walk, which would include sleep-out decks for 8 people. To construct accommodation with a main focus on the use, accredited environmental education products, and a ranger academy for guests to national parks. Mountain Zebra, tented accommodation and camping. So tented camps, wilderness camps, and then also a bush braai on OSVs for morning and night drives and providing refreshments to the guests. Then Table Mountain National Park, Hurikwaga, a number of the facilities there, not everything. The upper and the lower wash houses for boutique hotel and related tourism activities. The Silver Mine for accommodation and coffee shops. Slankop and Smitswinkel, more for backpackers and youth development accommodation. Cape Point accommodation. So there's accommodation at the Cape of Good Hope section with related tourism activities. The Gama Peak, also to develop an accommodation product with related tourism activities. Then iCycle Adventure, which is a mobile mountain bike rental facility with related tour guide services. Helicopter flips at Buffels Bay and Platboom. Oudekraal Borkiesdrift Slipway for boating and kayaking, maintaining kayaking rentals and guided tours at Oudekraal. And then guided tours on a 12-seater bicycle, providing 2-hour trips, stopping at 1 or 2 viewpoints across the route. Then Kloofneck Precinct, to develop and operate a multi-ecotourism hub, including boutique-style accommodation, coffee shop, restaurant, retail, and so forth in the northern section of Table Mountain. Signal Hill Project, develop and operate a restaurant, events, upgrade bulk infrastructure at the summit of Signal Hill. Tokai Manor Precinct, to operate the multi-use ecotourism facilities with related tourism activities. Then function and wedding sites, specific sites at the Cape of Good Hope. Grote Skuur, that burned down with the fire last year, so the Grote Skuur estate, tea room and restaurant. Obviously that will require some investment. Then Lister's Tokai Coffee Shop with relevant cultural interpretation at the Tokai Arboretum. Food trucks with open cafes to sell coffee confectionaries and so forth at Newlands, Kloofneck, Cecilia Forest, Signal Hill and Tafelberg Road. And then Cape Point, existing facility will be going out to retender in this financial year, pending the 333FA regulations. Obviously, the commercial use of the Cape Point tourism facilities, including a restaurant that they have there, 3 retail facilities, as well as a funicular offering. Okay, then smaller park again, Tankwa-Karoo, accommodation and related activities at Obaskraal and Soekop, to host the commercial events, including sporting events. And then the last park we're looking at is the West Coast National Park. So there's 11 existing chalets at Dynapos, which requires upgrade for the management thereof. Also build and operate the Langebaan Lodge in Langebaan town with a conference center and associated tourism activities. Then operate and maintain the Malgas and Jatten Island jetties and possible refurbishment of the historic buildings on both islands. This opportunity can include boat trips around the Kraalbaai Lagoon. Then food trucks selling food and snacks and non-alcoholic beverages at Preekstoel, Swartsbank and Kraalbaai. Geelbek Precinct, which is an existing restaurant, but we will add accommodation facilities, curio shop and multi-purpose center and other related tourism activities to make it a viable option. Then further also guided activities, guided tours in the parks, including stargazing. And that's all the projects from my side. We've shared the contact details with you. So as I indicated before, all private parties that are interested in specific projects, they must send me an email and indicate their interest. Thereafter, you will get an email from someone in the business development unit, and we'll engage with you to provide us with a business plan or whatever you promote, what you request. But we'll come back to you once we prioritize the projects. And that's all from me. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you very much, Annemie van Jaarsveld. She is, of course, the General Manager for Business Development Unit at SANParks. And of course, for those of you that have an idea that you'd like to obviously have vetted for consideration, you definitely now have an opportunity or at least an avenue to actually make your proposals, forward your proposals through to SANParks. And you can also check some of the case studies on the SANParks website, sanparks.org, so you can sort of get some insights onto what has happened and where perhaps you could find your niche within this remarkably important tourism sector. We are, of course, slowly meandering towards the end of the day, but there's still some very important conversations that we need to reflect on. And on this stage, it's the question of the legislative framework. And in a conversation involving public policy, private business, and the intersections in between, it's always important for all of us to sort of get an awareness of what it is that you need to be specifically aware of. Of course, the legislative framework has been designed for a particular purpose, and all we can do is simply learn how to navigate our way around it in a way that enables us to ensure that our ultimate objectives, which is to facilitate these very important partnerships, is not, of course, compromised. Someone who knows very well how these instruments work and what the key issues are is, of course, Mr. Lindokuhle Tlhatshwayo, who is the Senior Project Advisor at the PPP unit within National Treasury. Mr. Tlhatshwayo, if you can come through and give us some insights onto what we need to be aware of. And of course, I imagine there's a lot of people who are probably going to be thinking, can we ask the question of when are we going to resolve the question of what exactly is the right instrument for facilitating public procurement? The Constitutional Court has a view, others have a view, other companies have said, well, until we know better, let's stay away. But of course, you can give us some insights into that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Program Director, Honorable Minister, and yes, Honorable Minister, Chairperson of the Board, Ms. Miago, and the members of the Board, CEO, the Acting CEO, Mr. Dlamini, and I've also seen some other Acting CEO of KZN Wildlife and the CEO of Ismangaliso. And all the investors, I greet you all, and those who are in the virtual platform. My name is Lindokuhle Tlhatshwayo, as the program director has already indicated. Maybe before I start, let me indicate why there's GTEC there. It's because I didn't have to respond to those questions. They are National Treasury questions. So from GTEC, I won't be able to respond to those ones. But I think Annemie did explain the process that we Treasury is undertaking. So from my side, I'm going to take you through a very short presentation, which after the presentations, and I had to trim it to 28 slides from 30 slides, so I did a very good job of trimming the presentation. So it's not going to be a very long presentation. Let me start. So I'm going to look at the South African legislative framework and then institutional arrangements, as well as the challenges that we have recognized, and also touch on the toolkit and how SANParks has already developed themselves into that space. We have, like it was indicated earlier on in the morning, that we have a very beautiful legislative framework. I think this is one of them that we have, and in terms of for anyone in interest, if you want to know, we are I think we were number 5 in the World Bank research on PPPs Resource Center, when they were looking at the PPP frameworks around the world, we came up number 5 in the world on our framework. I'm not sure, yeah, thank you. And I'm not sure you're going to clap hands, Anemi, on our performance in implementing them. We are not that good when it comes to the implementation because we've got all the perceptions that are there, and some are true and some are not. But in terms of where this framework is coming from, it's coming from the PFMA, and then there are regulations that have been done with regards to PPPs, which is Treasury Regulation 16 that needs to be followed by national and provincial government. And also all of those legislative framework, they are trying to respond to the crucial question or to the instruction, in fact, from the Constitution, that whenever a state procures goods or services, it must do so in a process that is cost-effective, transparent, and all of those nice things, right? And in competitive. So whatever we do as government, if you move, there's a legislation that says moves to that direction. So if you move outside of the legislation, then you'll find yourself in the Zondo Commission. So those are some of the practicalities. So, okay. Now, I believe that in the PPP unit, we have a very highly capacitated unit in terms of, I can indicate to you that on average, if you look at the staff component of the unit, on average, we have 8 to 9 years experience of people who are there. So some of us have been there for almost 14 years now. And then the other guys have been there for 16, 17 years. So in terms of the knowledge base with regards to the implementation of this framework, we are very good in that one, and we are somewhere out there. And then, as you can see, that I'm from the GTEC, which is the component of the National Treasury, 100% wholly of the Department of Finance, not National Treasury. Headed by the head of GTEC, who is reporting directly to the Minister of Finance, and our unit is Transaction Advisory Services and PPPs. So we're guiding on large infrastructure procurement and as well as PPPs. So our scope was then increased since 2013 when we went into GTEC, where all the components that we're giving technical advisor within Treasury were then moved into GTEC to provide that service to government. So that's where we are coming from. Now, our role is to provide the technical assistance. We used to provide the regulatory as well as the technical assistance. The regulatory would be your approvals, registration of the project, and the variations, and all of those. Those are Treasury legislated requirements in terms of the process, so which are now being done by Treasury, and we are then responsible for technical advisor in taking you through the process, assisting you with drafting the terms of reference for advisors, assisting with the drafting of the terms of reference for project officers. So those are some of the services, and reviewing the documentations that are done. So those are some of the services that we are doing, and then National Treasury is providing the approvals as well as the registration of the projects. And then these are the sectors that we play in, I think, almost everything. And my responsibility is on the tourism as well as the ICT and business development and any other project that no one wants to do in the office. So they just take it to me and say, no, this is business development, deal with it. So I end up then being the advisor to some of those projects. Now, what is the objective of the toolkit? The objective of developing the toolkit exactly was to boost the tourism sector and ensuring that whenever we get into some kind of these arrangements with the private sector, we do so in a process that is beneficial to both entities, which is government as well as the private sector. So we believe that the toolkit it's giving us that kind of confidence, as well as giving the private sector that confidence to say, we know what we are talking about, as well as the clarity and the certainty with regards to what you are contracting and how are you contracting, because it can become something else if you don't know exactly the framework that you're going to go through when you are bidding, especially with the costs that are associated with these kinds of transactions. So that's the main reason. And then this is the tourism toolkit. I'm not sure if you can see it properly there. It's a bit fuzzy. It's separated into two. And okay, let me start explaining with these 3 key tests. There are 3 key tests with the process. On all PPPs, we've got affordability, value for money, and appropriate risk transfer. So your project, if you're doing a project, it must meet all of these requirements. So it must be affordable, it must be able to give net benefit to government, and you must also be in a position to transfer, we call it substantial risk transfer. And then the lawyers then, we'll leave it to the lawyers to debate what is substantial. We just call it substantial risk transfer. The lawyers then will take it apart in defining what is substantial, but we call it substantial risk transfer. So those are the key tests. So if the project is not affordable, why do you do it? If the project cannot transfer any risk, why do you do it? If the project does not give any benefit to government, why do you do the project? So we need a yes on all of those processes, and the process allows you to go through that process to identifying whether the project is affordable, it gives value for money, and there's an appropriate risk that is going to be transferred. As is indicated down there, to say you start with inception. I think Hapilo did talk about the process, so I'm not going to go through that process. But what is key here is that there are also processes that can be followed with regards to exemption, which I think SANParks is in that position now. In fact, it's been in that position for a while now, where they are getting exemptions. And for you to get exemption, you must have a track record of implementing such projects and managing this project, and they have already done that. So they are in that position to can do all of these processes in-house and follow the process. But the exemption is to follow the process in-house, where the board will then be responsible for approvals. It's not to say you cannot follow the process once you get an exemption. So you are not exempted from the process, but you are exempted from getting treasury approvals, which becomes institutional approvals. Hence, those 2 different routes that are there. One is an institutional approval, and the other one is a treasury approval. And also to indicate that some of the projects that are less than 10 million rands are highly likely to be exempted. So we will then receive those ones and then take it to treasury for exemption. But on the large ones, SANParks has already got some exemptions on those ones. But if it's a new project that they have never done, that's where we will say, oops, we need to go with you through this process, so that we make sure that all the requirements are met before it's then approved. And sometimes we also give partial exemption on some of these projects. And they all depend on how Lindogushe woke up on the day. No, there are requirements that you need to meet for you to get an exemption. So one of them is that you need to get prove your track record and the risk profile of the project that you are implementing, and the board, stability of the board also, as well as the executive in terms of taking through this process. So those are some of the requirements that are required for you to get that exemption. So on that note, we are in, with SANParks, I think we are there, and followed some, I've seen some of the projects that we have exempted already that they've showcased here. So which I think from an investor's point of view, we should be comfortable that we have seen what they wanted to do, and it has been approved as well by Treasury as well as the board of SANParks. Okay. And There are challenges. I can name a number of them, but I've got one or two there, which is one, it's time that it takes for this project. It's not gonna be like buying water, where I say I need 500 mils of water, and then you tell me this is how much your water will cost you, and then I decide whether I take that price or don't, and then that will be it. But with regards to a PPP process, it's an engaging process where we have to develop terms of reference, and then you have to then indicate to us, give us your proposal, we look at your proposal, then negotiate and so all of those things needs time. It can't happen overnight. And also we need time for the feasibility study to be done, approvals to be issued by Treasury. So we need all of that time, but then again, you will find that in some cases, institutions will sit with the project for 8 years and then come to Treasury 6 months before, and then they start saying, yeah, this is a very important project to us, it must be done now, and in the next 6 months we need to be finished with procuring this project. But you had this project for 8 years. And then the other question is, okay, fine, what are the development costs that you have set aside for this important project? No, we don't have mine. We don't have mine. But now, how important is this project? Then I've already determined my risk profile there, that this project is not going to go anywhere. So if I want to spend public money correctly, I must not invest my time in this project. I must look at those projects that are serious and then use public money on those ones. So time is very important. And then also dealing with the changes in terms of executive as well as the changes in personnel. Because sometimes people move on and then there are projects that have become a constant. You know, when they say in a mathematical formula, there's a constant, it doesn't change. I've become that. Everyone has changed, from transaction advisors to project officers, mayors, and municipal managers. I'm the only one that has never changed. All of them, they've changed. So those are some of the things that do happen, and we can't stop it. Those are challenges that are there. But I'm glad in SANParks we don't have as much of those ones, because we have the enemies who've been there for a while now, and the Happy Louis, and I think they are in a very better position to manage this process, and we're sleeping very well when it's a project from SANParks rather than other places. And I want to sleep very well, Mr. Kosin. And Mr. Durane, I want to also sleep very well. So as we are taking this journey, let's do it so that I will sleep very well. Yes. All right. And then those are some of the challenges, and the time and the rigor that it takes. It sometimes become a challenge, but Treasury has done a review, which I think they are going to issue out the outcomes later. I think somewhere around June, the minister will pronounce on that one. I'm not really sure on the time frame. But what we are all saying is that there is no simple answer to any of these challenges, because they involve individuals and people. But what is important is that the framework stays the same, which then protects everyone as well as protects the process that you have also already gone. So if Lindokuhle moves away, there's a document that says this is where he was. And then you look at the toolkit, and the toolkit says the next step is this one. So you start from there and then you move on. You don't start from scratch. So at least the process it's then going to assist us on that process. So in closing, we have been there for a while, and we can also accredit some of the development of the toolkit to SANParks. The toolkit itself, it's mimicking what the SANParks has gone through their first projects that they signed in 2000, around 2002. So it's more or less the copy and paste with some improvements. But it has been well workshopped with all the stakeholders to also then understand and buy into. So if you're following the process, you are not going to go wrong. The only time you're going to go wrong is when you want to question the process while you are doing it. You can't question something while you are implementing it, which means you are working against it. Why don't you let it flow? Then question the results, because the results are showing. I was very happy to hear that 80% of SANParks budget is coming from that one. Those are the results. If you're still questioning it now, I rest my case, Your Honor. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to the man who refuses to go away. He is the immovable force within the GTech unit at National Treasury, and obviously giving us some very important reflections on how that unit works and how, in particular, it would have an impact on the PPPs that we're strongly hoping emerge from today's summit. And of course, this is not a conversation of the people just inside the room. There's everybody out there watching on the virtual platforms and also those that are following us on Twitter. So if there are any questions that you'd like to pose, of course, this is now the opportunity for the individuals in the room, but also Ray, I don't know if we've received any questions from the online platforms. It looks like, Mr. Tlajaya, you covered everything so well. No one has got any questions in relation to what needs to happen next. So, of course, no pause. We are going full steam ahead. And at this stage, I would like to check. There is a question there. There is a question on the floor. There's always a question on the floor. The mic is coming through. For the record, I probably won't answer your question, so please don't put me under the bus.
Thank you, Program Director. My name is Lebo Mokheti. I'm from Ramatlababa, along the border of Mafike, Botswana and South Africa. That's in Mafike. My house is just a few kilometers from a park called Botswana Game Reserve, CEO. And I grew up there, so I understand the model of the park, how it runs. But my simple model and understanding is the CSI. And one of the problems that I'm sure SANParks has, which I've picked up from the presentation today, is that how then the parks involve communities to participate in the whole business program. And one of the good CSI that I think you should adopt and you should follow up the model is to study how then the Botswana government used to do it. Why I'm mentioning the Botswana government as a homeland is because they've got many parks. As a province now called Northwest, chairperson, your undivided attention. Why I'm saying you should go and study the model of the old Botswana government, it is because they've got many parks than any other province nationally, and how they used to do it with communities. Those who grew up there, I'm sure you'll remember, Mr. Molefe, is that they used to what we call conservation clubs. And in those conservation clubs, the government was recruiting students, scholars, learners, and youth to participate in a club. And that was about nature conservation. It was a subject in schools, and practically, it was making communities to be part of the park. Therefore, park security. The kids growing around the park, they will know that the park is important. We should preserve nature other than the rhino horn. So you must go to Nkuhlu, you must go to Pambeni, you must go to Hazyview and Numbi and teach those young people and make them to be part of the park. If you don't do it, they'll keep on looking for a rhino horn because the rhino horn is a gold. So that will also teach them to understand the business and the dynamics around the park. So it's a industry advice or a brotherly advice that I'm giving forward. But now when it comes to investment now, because I'm a possible investor, well, my interest is still in the Northwest, but unfortunately, legislatively, SANParks ends somewhere. Then there's a whole of parks that belongs to Northwest government. And the history there, it's only the 100 a million wildlife gate scandal, unfortunately. But I want to say, the biggest monster in this investment, again, thank you that Mr. Slashwa has put it simply so, is time. Because time, it goes back to EIAs, it goes to all regulative issues. And the investor doesn't have time for that. And most of the time is that when you deal with officials in these institutions, they will buy time. They will take more of your time until the term of office is about to end. Then that's when they want to act. And it becomes too late. You know, and he has been sitting there, like he said, there's so many mayors and everybody coming and going. So my other advice and my request is that we'll come and knock in SANParks. And yes, it's good that he said there's no simple answer in these things. But some of our projects that we want to invest in are not covered by your 123 opportunities. Because the 123 covers much more of your accommodation, your retail stuff, and so forth and so forth. And the ones that we want to bring, we really need a guidance and a team that will assist us from the Treasury, National Treasury, and also from the institutional, which we want to move with. And my request is that when we come and knock with those opportunities, let's remember where we agreed that we'll assist each other, which is today in this summit, and not waste more time. Because the investor, when he has money, I can't be loitering around when I want to invest. I want to invest immediately and have the returns.
All right.
So it's my humble request. But lastly, I want to say, what is key in your bids when you take them out? Include communities.
Yeah.
Include communities as much as you can, involve them, and make sure that locality participate. Otherwise, they'll close the gates, and you don't have volumes in the parks. Ignore the last constitutional court advice. Thanks.
Okay. No, thank you very much for those reflections, and I'm pretty sure that the board members and the acting CEO are definitely taking them into heart. I can see notes are already being taken there. This front row has been very busy throughout the day taking notes. So, of course, this is a very different summit in that they're taking notes here, and they're definitely going to make sure that all of the issues that have been highlighted today are indeed factored into how the processes are rolled out going forward. And, of course, on that note, I would like to call upon a board member, the chairperson of the Human Capital Committee, Nandimaya Tulakoza, to give us the vote of thanks and to close the summit for us. And on my part, thank you very much for having tolerated me for all this time. And of course, remember, there are two things that I would request you to do. First of all, do not sleep at home tonight, because we need to count those tourism numbers before midnight. It's very important for our evaluation. That's the first one. And secondly, when you decide not to sleep at home, well, there's only one place to go, and that's the province of KwaZulu-Natal. Thank you very much.
Thank you to the program director. I think he's the proudly KZN South African. Thank you very much to the program director. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I think you need to give yourselves a round of applause for staying throughout the day. It just demonstrates that indeed you are committed to grow SANParks to the future, SANParks Tourism to the future. And thank you very much. We sincerely appreciate that as SANParks. Honorable Minister in absentia, and she was here with us this afternoon rather. The chairperson of SANParks board, Memiako, very, very committed chairperson. We ask Gijimisa, chairperson. We are Sebenzisa, and we appreciate her leadership. Other board members of SANParks, those who are here with us and those who have joined us virtually. Let me also acknowledge the SANParks members led by the acting CEO, Mr. Dumisane Dlamini. Thank you, sir, also for leading the executive and for making them run as well. Let us also acknowledge the other leaders and CEOs from other government entities, the business leaders, the investors who are here with us, the speakers, the panelists that we listened to earlier on, the tourism industry partners, the members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, I'm speaking on behalf of the chairperson of the Tourism Committee of the Board, my sister, colleague Zuki Ramasia, who would have wanted to be here with us this afternoon, but she took ill. So I'm presenting the vote of thanks on her behalf. And the first port of call is to thank our Honorable Minister, Minister Chrissy, who started at another conference this morning, the People and Parks Conference, but she was able to come here to this summit to engage with us. So we are very honored and we are very thankful to the minister. The minister's commitment to the sector is notable and appreciated. This is indicative of the minister availing herself this afternoon, and for that we have no words to express our gratitude to the minister. To the SANParks Board Chairperson, Ms. Pemiako, together with members of the board, my colleagues, you've taken the philosophy of serving leaders to heart and in practice, hence your presence today. We thank you for reminding us, Chair, earlier on why we are here. You reminded us about the importance to grow the tourism industry within SANParks, because it will ensure that we are able to continue to fund conservation for future generations. We thank you for reminding us the importance of tourism and conservation in our country, and for telling us why we are here today. In order for South African national parks to continue on a positive trajectory, in an effort to excel in the execution of our mandate, we must continue to build on relationships we have with our partners, that is you who are here today. We want to do this through public-private partnerships with the current concessionaires as well as the new investors. We really want to thank you for rolling up your sleeves to lend a hand in our mission to protect South Africa's heritage for now and into posterity. It is our hope that your gesture here today and that of the potential investors who are here with us today will match your efforts to take up the baton and join us as we take this journey and many other strategic initiatives forward. To the panelists who really engaged on the future of tourism with Leon, as well as the speakers, we say thank you very much for the insight you have shared here this afternoon. You have provided a critical aspect of the business with vigor and great energy. Thank you to the panelists also for encouraging South Africa, or South Africans rather, to spend at least one day away from home. That way, they are tourists, and they are contributing to the tourism industry within SANParks and in South Africa as a whole. And we were informed that whilst we do that, we must have a smile and be the ambassadors of our country. We thank you for your part in making this a great session, to the panelists and the speakers. For that, we salute and thank you. We need not forget the sterling job of the program director, the proudly KZN South African. Our brother, Mr. Kaya Sithole, or our son, should I say. And of course, the facilitator of the panel, Leanne Manas. Wasn't she good? Very, very good. Thank you so much to Leanne in absentia. You both have really showcased extraordinary probing to the panel and kept us in check throughout the day. Thank you for steering the ship in a manner that you did, and for provoking our thoughts on real issues in the industry, on real challenges that are faced also by our people, and for which the panelists brilliantly responded to. Thank you very much for that. Ladies and gentlemen, an event like this, as we know, never happens overnight. It requires consistent planning, execution, and indeed long hours. So, a heartfelt thank you to everyone who got involved day in and out in the preparation of this event. And I'm talking about the acting CEO of SANParks, and I think he deserves a round of applause for steering this summit to be such a success it was, as well as the executive managers. I think we need to give them a round of applause as well. We thank you all for being part of this very, very successful SANParks Tourism Investment Summit. We also thank the new investors who are going to take up some of the opportunities. I think somebody said, just consider at least one of the opportunities that have been presented to us this afternoon. And we want to thank you in advance. Thank you very much again for being part of this summit. And please drive back home safely. The summit is declared officially closed on behalf of the board of SANParks. Thank you very much.